Uh-oh.
Okay. I was like, my mic is still muted. This is 2 weeks in a row that our intro has played us.
It knows what we're talking about today, Sam. It knows,
Apparently
and it's
so.
like, I
Is
don't
it
want
trying
to
to
hear these
silence
ladies
us?
bitch all day.
Too fucking bad. Anyway, welcome to episode 90 of Power Bombshells. I am Sam and that is Mel, and we have a lot to talk about. And hopefully, neither one of us have any more tech issues, and maybe the Fight Game Media intro music won't try to play us off again like we're on an award show. It's like,
It's because we're the longest winded ones. And we get
apparently,
away with it. It's because we're girls talk too long. We just
I guess
flap our
so.
little flaps. So
Oh, wow. Yeah, so I guess we won't fix that in post because Garrett thought it was funny the last time. So now, Garrett, you get it again this week. You have another weird opening.
because we genuinely love and appreciate you, we're gonna go ahead and give you just the most hilarious openings we can come up with.
Yes,
Totally unintentionally.
Nikki said your mic feud continues. Apparently so. It seems to be working this week. It's not buzzing a high pitched noise in my ear. Where last week I couldn't use my microphone because I was like, I'm not listening to that for 2 hours.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
I was like, I could barely listen to it for 7 seconds. So I was like, so it appears to be working this week, but now it's playing me again. So I don't know. We'll see.
It didn't want us to talk. It was like, whatever. Actually, in
No,
fairness,
they're gonna
there were
talk about
other
Ric
people
Flair
that were
again.
there were people that are interested in hearing us talk. So whatever all you're trying to do, Mike, it's too bad. There's people
Listen,
that
if we
want to
can't do
hear
it
us.
now,
They
I'll do
want to
it
hear
later.
our piece.
I was gonna say if we can't do it now, don't think I won't record it and play it later because I will.
Well, we'll play it and then do a Q&A afterwards.
Right, there we go.
We'll watch along with you
We'll find
and
a way
be
to
in the
make it.
comments.
There we go. Listen, we'll find a way
I'm
to make
full
this
of
conversation
ideas
happen.
today.
And actually, some of it'll build off of a conversation we started last week about a certain person who we thought was only going to be in AEW for a few months, and now they're going to be around even longer.
And
I was like,
we
that
were
kind of ties into all of
fooled.
this. This was quite the week in well, just overall in wrestling and in personal lives. There's a lot going on. So it's like this week just had a lot going on.
And a real one of those life roller coaster from hell
Yeah,
weeks.
yeah, yeah.
Hey, living it's never boring.
No, that's for sure. Yes, I was like, hang on. Speaking of Garrett, he just tweeted about us, so make sure I get that on.
Oh,
Like,
thank
don't
you.
just wait till you see the
I would like to
opening.
say this loud and clear is that I respect Garrett. I think he is one of the most compassionate, respectful, creative people I've ever met in my life. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Garrett. I think
There would
that
be no Power Bombshells if he hadn't decided that Mel and I, who did not know each other, should do a podcast. And here we are, literally 90 episodes later.
that's
Like,
right.
that's insane.
That's exactly right. And he's a great person and does great work. And we all have jobs to do. There's
Yeah.
no there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, okay, folks? Like, if you land a giant interview, your boss says go do a giant interview, you do it. That's
Right.
it. End of
Yeah.
discussion. It does not affect who the human being Garrett Gonzalez is, and he is one awesome, amazing human. And
He is.
shout out to him.
He's been a
So,
huge supporter of us, and he actually was on standby. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do this show today because of some family stuff that happened. Unfortunately, I won't go into details, but unfortunately, I had an uncle pass away on Friday, and he had been in the hospital for a few days leading up to it. And I was concerned about not being able to. I didn't want to leave Mel in a lurch, and all of a sudden, I'm like, hey, I can't go, and so I had just let them know that, I may not be here. And Garrett stepped up and was like, if I need to, I can come in and be with Mel. And talk with her. So he was going to make sure that the show happened regardless. And so I really appreciate that he was willing to take time out of his schedule when he's not normally doing stuff like this. And so I really appreciate that he offered. And even up until yesterday, because I hadn't had a chance to talk to them because it happened later Friday afternoon, and then I went to be with family. And so he even said yesterday, he was like, if you need me, I can come at this time. And I was like, no, I think I'll be all right. But I really appreciate that, he was going to step in if I needed him to. So that's
him. That's him right there.
Yep.
So
100%.
Enough on that subject. But anyway, I think it's important to have that out there. And my condolences to you and your family.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. But yeah, so there's a lot going on this week, like I said, personally and in wrestling, and a lot. I tweeted the other day, I was like, this has been a hell of a week for women in wrestling, from especially women as far as talent goes with shady ass women's promotions, and then from women who are in media and content creation and the way they've been treated the last few weeks, and people have been speaking out on that. And then we turn around and we have one of the most notorious sex pests in wrestling history getting a multi-year contract right on the heels of all of that. So it's been a banner week for women in wrestling.
Hey, I have to ask, because Bob did make this point to me, and I was like, okay, I hope you're right, because in a way I want this to be the actual truth. He's like, well, it's November, he's here till March, that's multi-year, like maybe
I wish, but it's a 2-year deal. His business partner went on, he was on, I forget what radio show he went on. I don't know if it was Busted Open or he went on to something. It's a 2-year deal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I wish that's what it really was the end of this year.
Me too. I wanted that to be true. And when you said that to me, I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna hang on to that for a little while, and that happy, wonderful feeling. So
I would be a lot better with it if it was. I mean, first of all, like we saw, because Mel and I talked about this last week, and I had planned on clipping it, and then real life happened, and so it's there if you want to listen to last week's conversation. But we did talk about Ric Flair last week. We talked about him because at the time that's when we thought he was only going to be around till March, and the fact that they brought him out on TV and all that stuff. So we said a lot about it last week, but then it turned into staying around till March to now a 2-year deal. And his energy drink is the official energy drink of AEW. And apparently some of that has some contract. I haven't really looked a whole lot into it, but some people are saying that the energy drink is paying like a large portion of the contract, I guess. And so AEW is not on the hook for, I guess, most of the financial part of the contract, but they've made it so the energy drink will be, because they sent out a press release last week and said that was the official energy drink of AEW. It will be in the locker rooms at select shows. They'll be selling the product. I think it's going to have brand placement like on the commentators, like on the commentary desk, that you will see the Woo energy drink. So. It kind of reminds me of the Logan Paul stuff that they're doing in WWE with his Prime Energy. Sounds like they're kind of doing it. That's kind of similar. What's happening. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is if you look at it from an ad revenue point of view, like it is a good way to get a whole bunch of money up front. Because the idea behind getting ads is like that you go to the person that you're going to buy the ad space from. And like I did this we had this with our restaurant where someone came to us and wanted to advertise, and we did a monthly contract plus trade with them so that they could like give things away on the radio and do the stuff like this and whatever. And so deals like that happen a lot, where a lot of what's paid for is paid not in physical money, but in product. It's paid in, I can send a listener out to a night for pizza and a beer like that. Well, we can't we can't give away alcohol, but whatever.
Right. But I know what you mean. And so I kind of wonder if if he would have taken this deal to WWE had Logan Paul and Prime not kind of already been there. Because I think Prime does. I don't keep up with WWE on a regular basis. So I know that there is some involvement with Prime. Like I know that they had somebody I think it was KSI dressed up in the Prime Energy costume or whatever during the match. And like, so they've had that type of deal. So I'm guessing because that deal is in place that Ric Flair couldn't bring Woo to WWE. And so I wonder if he was like, well, if I can't take it to them, I'm taking it to their rival. And he has said in the past that he won't do anything that could damage Charlotte's career. So that makes me also think that maybe Vince really is less involved because he doesn't feel like Triple H is going to hurt Charlotte, like book her terribly or quit booking her, putting her on TV at all because of he's with a rival company now. So, but yeah, I don't like it at all. But I'm wondering if that's kind of what's happening.
I don't know. I started to listen to The Observer because I respect Garrett as an interviewer, and I wanted to see how you would do an interview that, like, when you're a journalist, you have to like interview. You don't get to pick who you interview, so it's like, sometimes it's like, sometimes you want to listen to like. I like watching people where they're like a little out of their not wheelhouse, but like where it's like not necessarily like this is something I would have picked to like jump up out of bed and go, I want to interview this person or that person, but still gets through the interview. And because I respect him as a voice, like because he, was somebody that I started listening to on that network. So
right.
But I got through like some of the like deal with the sponsorship, and that sounds pretty close to right. I'll read The Observer when I get a chance. I had to put everything down at one point and just like, I'm playing Zelda. I'm done. I'm playing Zelda. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm going to go play Zelda and eat barbecue sandwiches that I made and have a nice weekend with my husband. And remember that there's really, really important stuff in the world.
Yeah. It's just it's very frustrating to see. One of the biggest issues I have with it is you actively call out Vince McMahon for how he treats women, which also came off as really gross because you're using sexual assault and rape as points. And it's not like you don't care about the victims, you care about shaming Vince McMahon, which Vince McMahon should be shamed, but you're using it in a way that, like where you don't care, you don't give a shit about the victims. It's about trashing Vince McMahon. Then you literally weeks later turn around and sign Ric Flair to a multi-year deal. This man is a serial sex pest. There are stories upon stories about him out there. We just had the Dark Side of the Ring episode that aired where it came out what happened with him and the flight attendant. She sought, legal action against him. So this was a really serious thing that he did. And at the time he was originally supposed to be on AEW television with Andrade, and because that episode came out, they backed off. And so Tony waited until he thought it died down and then brings him back under the guise of, oh, this is for Sting. I brought Ric Flair for Sting. This is his gift. And now he has a multi-year contract. And so the whole thing is very disingenuous, which I think is part of what makes it even worse. And then you sit here and say you're an alternative to the other company. And I mean, yes, there are people in AEW who are signed with him who were named and speaking out. Like we've talked about this many times, and we know it's in this business, it's hard to get away from. But this is somebody who is open. Like we know the story of what happened with just that one incident alone should keep him off of TV. There's probably countless other stories like this out there. And it just feels, and somebody made a point, and now I'm wondering this. Somebody asked if because the Tony Khan has a big announcement on Wednesday, turned out to be this nothing announcement. Some people think it was the Ric Flair announcement, but they thought the fans were not going to react well, so they didn't put Ric Flair on TV to announce the deal.
Okay, that's funny that you say that. I didn't see anybody say that anywhere, but in my head, I was like sitting around going, I wonder if that big announcement was going to be Ric Flair and he was afraid he was going to come out and get a whole bunch of boos. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, wait. But I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't voice that, but I was. So
Yeah,
I
I
went home, and
I saw
I guess
another.
I'm glad that I wasn't like totally crazy because
No, another podcaster I saw tweet it, and she was like, I'm wondering, because she quote tweeted Bully Ray, because Bully Ray was saying, like, if it were me, I would have brought, Rick down to the ring. Tony would have come out there and be like, I want to offer, like, they would have done the contract signing on TV, basically. Then he welcoming him to AEW and that type of thing. And so she quote tweeted it, and she said, I think this was the big announcement, but they realized that he may not get a good reaction. So they scrapped it and decided to do it through a press release, which is funny because I joked about on Wednesday night the announcement with being to sign up for an email to find out about Wembley tickets a month
I
in
was
advance.
talking to Mike and JD from
and
Mike and
I,
JD show about that exact thing.
yeah, and I tweeted this could have been a press release. Well, after the show ended, they sent out a press release, and I was like, "Oh my god, they did send out a press release!" And so I screenshot it and tweeted it. And then the next day, we get the Ric Flair announcement is a press release, and so I was like, "It sounds highly likely that." I don't think that Tony expected quite the backlash that it's getting. And rightfully, he rightfully deserves his backlash. And I don't, fans, we've talked about it. We've talked about how fans treated Vince McMahon because he's the Mr. McMahon character. And so when he's like, those people cheered him when he came out on TV last year and acted, and they were like, some of them were like bowing to him and doing all this obnoxious shit because they don't care. And so I feel like we're going to see similar stuff with Ric Flair. People in the arenas who are either not online or just don't give a shit because he's Ric Flair, they're gonna woo, they're gonna cheer him. I mean, I do think he's gonna get some boos depending on where he's at. Probably not in the Carolinas because this is Flair country and people will woo for anything. So they've done it just waiting on ROH shows to start. Somebody will woo, and then the
sure
rest
they do
of
it at
it.
freaking baseball games and hockey games.
Yeah,
I mean,
so,
here around
right.
this region, it happens at sporting events, or
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like, I mean, if you're in the Northeast, you can get a Yankees suck chant going anytime, anywhere. Like it's almost like that with the Ric Flair thing. I mean, no, that's not a joke either. Trust me. If you want to get a Yankees suck chant started, do it in the Northeast.
Oh, I can imagine.
Anywhere you can do it, any public space, it'll happen.
But yeah, so I mean, I'm not naive enough to think that people are gonna like just boo. Like he's not gonna get the treatment that I think he deserves. He should be booed out of the building, but I know that's not going to happen. And I know that people are going to treat him like Vince McMahon. They're going to cheer for him. They're going to act like he's just because of who he is, or they're going to treat him as the Ric Flair character, which the Ric Flair character is not very far off from the man himself.
Yeah.
But I do think because Tony is so online and is really invested in what fans think, I think he expected some backlash, but I don't think he expected just all around. Like maybe it's just the people I follow, but I saw so many people who were really annoyed by this signing, and it was all for the same reasons. And they were like, I can't believe he would do this. And they were like, this is just, there's no reason for it. And like, I didn't see any people like applauding it. Well, there is one journalist, the person who asked if Io would wrestle Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift
had tweeted, and by the time I saw it, he deleted it. But he said that all these people say that they would boycott AEW would interview Ric Flair if given the chance. I will tell you right now, if I was given the chance to interview Ric Flair, I would not do it. And I saw a lot of people who quote tweeted before he deleted it. I saw Sean Ross Sapp, saw several other people. They're like, no. I mean, and there's some cases where you have to, like we've talked about that, but if they have the option to, they're not going to choose to interview him. And I would absolutely turn that
there's
down.
an entirely separate situation. Sean Ross Sapp is his boss. He chooses who he interviews. Right. If somebody is like on a network and they are obligated to do interviews, it is their job to, and they land Ric Flair, they do the interview and that's it.
Well, if Sports Illustrated has the opportunity to interview Ric Flair, they're not going to turn that down. Yeah. Justin Massaro,
Garrett pointed out to me that it made Variety, which was, I was like, okay, so this, it is a big, it's a big deal to some people. I guess it'll get eyeballs on the show for it. Just what it does for me is it's because the consistency has been gone and we've been like we've been having the losing the plot conversation and things like that. It just chills.
Yeah, this is just
it chills my enthusiasm for, especially with like a pay-per-view coming up during a time when it's hard financial times and the holidays are coming and there's a lot going on in my life.
Sure.
It dampens my enthusiasm for wanting to fork that $50 over at this time, maybe. And
for sure.
And seeking out additional content made by the same company.
Yeah. Well, and then, and I was going to say, but I forgot this isn't on a pay-per-view. This is on Dynamite, because I was about to say, well, then we have that, because, there were a lot of talk about Paul White is going to be in a match, but that's not going to be on, it's not going to be on Full Gear. That's on Dynamite, and not this week, but the following week, which, there's that whole conversation about that, like, about, using, having Jericho and having them on the same team as Kenny and Coda. And like, but it's after such a, people were already upset with Tony with the way, like, and that's the conversation, like the Dynamite show has had the conversation, and so have other people, that even hardcore fans who have been there since day one, like you and I, that they don't like the product. They don't like what's being put out on TV. They like certain things here and there, but overall they're down on the product, which is, that's a problem. And then obviously there's declining ratings, declining attendance, and signing Ric Flair is not going to move tickets. I mean, it might move a few, but this man's not selling out arenas. He hasn't done that in 20 years. So I don't think.
Well, it's certainly not going to move tickets with the people who have equity with. You have equity with me, but not that much equity. And your prices are steadily rising. I've been in your arena shows, including 2 big giant pay-per-views. Like, this is the first time I've sat here and gone, depending on where we are next year, I don't know if I care about Forbidden Door. Maybe I'm going to put that somewhere else.
Yeah, and like I said a few weeks ago, like, if AEW comes to Charlotte or Greensboro, I want to go, because if Sting is on either, like, I want to see Sting one last time. I haven't seen him since he was in TNA, but now knowing that Ric Flair might be there with him, and probably if they come to Charlotte, I expect Ric Flair to be on the card, and that doesn't make me want to buy tickets. Yeah, and this is that market, and like Nikki said, this happens, at the wooing happens at concerts around here. So they expect that will be a situation where they're in Charlotte and or Greensboro. They're going to put Ric Flair on those cards, expecting that type of response, and thinking that, and he thinks that's going to be okay. And I was talking to somebody about, and I even talked to Nikki about this when the signing happened, and then I was talking to somebody else about it. This signing is a pure fanboy signing. Tony signed him because childhood Tony loved Ric Flair, and he signed him because he can. Now it turns out that maybe also because he didn't have to fork over as much money because of the energy drink stuff. And so he just looked at this as he cares about nothing else in this situation. This is a purely Tony decision. He just did it because he can, and because he's a fanboy and he wanted to. And then he's going to use, when fans woo, he comes to places like Charlotte and fans do the woo and they give him a good reaction, he will use that as justification for his signing, is what I think he's going to do.
I mean, and it'll work.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is, but
yeah, I'm not as down on the product as a lot of people seem to be. There are things about it I don't enjoy. I don't like. I wish they would do some other things. Like I don't necessarily have a problem with Paul White being in a match. I like him. I've always been a fan of his.
Sure.
I don't necessarily even mind having a Jericho reunion. I don't like that Kenny and Coda got dragged into this. They have nothing to do. They don't need to be involved in this. This is a show. I'm fine with this being a Dynamite match. Like, this is not a pay-per-view. Like, I'm afraid that I will not be surprised if this turns into something that they bring to Full Gear where it's on the buy-in. And I don't necessarily have a problem with Paul White being on the buy-in either. I just don't necessarily and they typically use veterans. Oh, like when they bring in, when they bring in veterans and things like that, they typically have handled them very well. But now, and even with, I'm not crazy about Jeff Jarrett. Like, I don't hate Jeff Jarrett, but I don't like, he's not, I would rather other people be on TV than Jeff Jarrett. But at least when they've booked Jeff Jarrett, like, he's not, they've backed off of using him so much. And then, like, I didn't even really think about it until I was reading an article from somebody from Daily DDT wrote, and they were talking about how he's wrestling like mid-card guys. So it's not like he's necessarily, he's not out there beating like Ricky Starks or, Wardlow or these names you're trying to build up. So at least they've done that with it. I will give them credit for that. And they've used Sting really well. And so I have no desire to see Ric Flair wrestle. And Ric Flair's out here talking about how he wants to wrestle MJF. And I'm like, and I feel like they're going to do it because that's what Rick wants, and what Rick wants, he gets. And I do not want to see him wrestle at all. And they're saying he's cleared to wrestle. I don't know what doctor is clearing him, but I have no desire to see Ric Flair wrestle. And I know that's what's going to happen. And it'll probably be a pay-per-view match.
Well, this is the thing. It's less and less. I actually talked to Jim Belly about this a little bit too. I mean, we were kind of chatting on his thing and online because I had tweeted a little bit of discipline, my knee-jerk reaction. I don't usually knee-jerk tweet, but I did when this happened, and was like, well, that'll help free up some of my extra space. And he was like, I'm genuinely curious if you mean it. And I'm like, I'll still probably watch Wednesdays, but that's going to be my main motivation. And this is becoming less of an alternative every week. It feels like it's getting further. You still have a whole roster full of people. I know that there were some people that you just had to sign. I get all of those things.
Yeah, you and I have had that conversation many times.
Many times.
Yeah.
But it's more, it's looking less like an alternative and more like a look at the nostalgia show with all these like.
Right. And that's what we complained about with WWE all the time. They rely so heavily on that, like they do the 25 years of Raw and 25 years of DX. And then they do, then when they were going head to head on the Tuesday Night War a few weeks ago, they brought in the Undertaker. Like, so they do that. We fuss at them for doing it. And then that's what this is becoming. And again, like, I don't like if Paul White wants to have like a couple final matches and stuff or something, I don't necessarily have an issue with that. I don't mind having like, I've talked about this before. I enjoy Dustin Rhodes matches. They don't use him very often. He was on Collision last night.
It was actually kind of fun.
Really fun triple threat, and I really enjoyed it because obviously it was the workhorseman, and I really like Kip Sabian, and so I was all about the Sex Stallions. I thought it was a lot of fun. Like in that situation, like stuff like that is fine. Like I don't mind that, and it's when it becomes your main focus.
Yeah, Collision isn't the main show. It's your Saturday night fun show. It's the show you should be. Honestly, that's where you should be doing a lot of this Sting and all of the building of that should be your Saturday night. You've got 2 hours. It's the same length of time as Dynamite. Why not do Sting's retirement build on Saturday nights instead of Wednesday nights so you can keep your Wednesday for what your core audience and what you were originally intended for?
I think more people are invested in Sting than Ric Flair, though. And so I think that's why I don't have I love Sting. I have
but that would just drive more eyes to Saturday night somehow. I mean, even DVR numbers work.
And so they were talking last night they had Andrade, and Andrade was talking about how he will answer next week if he's going to work with CJ Perry. And I'm thinking he's going to say no. And they're somehow going to bring Ric Flair into this because that's what they were originally going to do. I mean, Ric Flair is there for Sting, so they may keep him on that. But I'm wondering if they're going to put him on Collision with Andrade. Maybe.
I mean,
but maybe he is going to go with, maybe he does go with CJ Perry for now and they just keep Rick on Dynamite because they think I don't know why they think Rick is going to be a ratings draw. I assume that's what they think is going to happen. And
okay, so I kind of nerd out because Paul is actually the point person on numbers. And so he does talk about it. And I do end up nerding out a little bit about some of it just because I understand and I want the product to survive. And Sadly, like their over 50 numbers have been increasing while their 18 to 34, whatever, has been declining. And it's like,
Well,
remember when, I mean, back in the day, like Mike and JD had this discussion, like back in the day, they were killing that demographic. They were destroying WWE in that
yeah,
demographic. Even in, oh, it's not a million. It doesn't matter. They were destroying you without a million in that demographic.
yeah,
And they were selling shows out in like 10 minutes. You couldn't touch these tickets. Now
yeah,
it's like Full Gear has tickets. Full Gear has
yeah.
tickets available right now. They're doing
Right.
BOGOs for stuff on
Right. I don't
Dynamite
there's
and
not an issue.
it's
Companies, and
Rampage and Collision.
I don't know why people shit on the BOGOs or the family 4
I
packs and
like
things
it.
like that, because especially in this economy getting this close to the
Yeah, hell
holidays,
yeah.
they need to be offering tickets like that. Tickets are expensive, and AEW's tickets have gone up just like WWE's tickets have gone up like that, and I
Everybody.
get that. So I don't understand why people shit on that. I'm like, it's affordable. Make it so people can take their family. If that's the difference between a family of 4 going or not going, then offer the stupid package. Who gives a shit, as long as
Yeah,
they're
I mean, we
buying
bought
your
one.
ticket?
It was
Because
cheaper for
once
us to
they're
buy
there,
it in
they're
Toronto. So
yeah, and like
we
merch is
got goods.
expensive.
We got good seats.
Yeah, that's what you were. Yeah, I remember you telling me that. So who cares about that? That portion. Like, I don't care if WWE's always done that. I used to get emails all the time. I have seen WWE have tickets for like Greenville on what the hell's the name of that stupid web, on a Groupon. I've seen
Oh,
Groupon
yeah, 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 yeah.
WWE before. If
Ticketmaster
AEW is
sends me
on,
deals because I booked tickets on there for WWE. So all the stuff that you've booked tickets for, you get like the emails for if you didn't unclick
yeah.
the thing that I didn't.
Mhm.
Oops. But it's done sends me things and it's like WWE specials. And I'm like,
Yeah,
okay,
that's what I'm saying.
in
Who
this way,
cares?
I would go because I'm not going to spend $127 for a WWE show, but I might spend $27 for a WWE
Right,
show.
exactly. And so, yeah, and Laurent said, WWE does it. Yeah, which is why I don't understand why people crap on it. If it's going to move tickets, you want people to watch your product. And if you can make it affordable for them to go, then it's not, I don't understand what the big deal about that is. I don't understand.
Nobody's coming down on like the baseball 4-pack. The only reason it's a bad thing is that
NASCAR
it's
does
like
it.
it's I think it's good for Collision because you're still building your audience. And I think it's
Yeah.
good for Rampage because they're doing essentially like a 2-pack where you do Friday and Rampage and Saturday, and it helps bring people in or whatever if they split it.
Yeah.
And they can do kind of it's not live Rampage, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's incentives, and you are getting, like we talked about a few weeks ago, like it's a lot to sit through
All
ROH
different.
and Collision, but for your ticket price, you are getting a ton of wrestling.
Yeah.
So and then we talked about how obviously it's your time. You're investing, like 5 or 6 hours of your time. So you have to consider that. But as far as like a monetary value, like you're getting, and the same thing with with Rampage. I mean, Dynamite, when they film Rampage with it, you're getting, yes, you have to sit there for 4 or 5 hours, but on the other hand,
Oh yeah.
for your ticket you are paying, you're getting a ton of wrestling for it. And so I guess the people just have to weigh what works for them and what works for their time and their money. I want to go over here to the comments. So Nikki said that Coda wants to show Paul that if he lands on his that he lands on his head to keep from getting the shakes. Yes, there's a that was going around that says Coda falls on his head every 30 minutes to keep from getting the shakes.
That's a way to handle it.
Yes. Laurent says they haven't handled Jeff Jarrett too well. Look at all those title shots he got. Ditto for the Hardy brothers. They need to be featured a lot less. The Hardy brothers I I just happened to be wearing a Hardy Boys shirt today because I saw it in my closet and I was like, oh, I haven't worn that in a while. But I feel like they've been featured less. They are typically, when they're on TV, they're on Rampage or they're on Collision. They're not on Dynamite anymore, unless the only reason I feel like we may eventually see them on that is whenever they build Edge and Christian, whenever Edge and Christian decide, or Adam Copeland and Christian do their tag team run again. I'm sure we're getting them versus the Hardys, but I think that's down the line. But yeah, I mean, but but Laron makes a good point. Like, there's other people that they could be using, and we've talked about, like, they could be using Kip Sabian on TV, which they, we did see that last night on Collision. But there's and like Abaddon, like we've talked about how they could have been using them, and they probably did only bring them back because it was Halloween. But there's people who could be using these spots, or they keep having ROH matches, like Samoa Joe. So last Thursday, Samoa Joe officially surpassed Jay Lethal as the longest reigning ROH television champion of all time. Was he on Honor Club on Thursday? He was not. He broke the record and wasn't even on Honor Club.
He was on Collision last night.
Yep. Challenging, and Keith Lee challenged him for the title next Wednesday on Dynamite. Not on Honor Club.
Not on even though there was an anniversary. How awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, every time.
Yep. and then like when the Hung Bucks lost the titles on Wednesdays, I laughed and I was like, they aren't going to Honor Club. Like
that, I know they're so disincentivizing. It's just like, why should
I know what they're doing. I think the reason they're doing it is because the Young Bucks won that match where they can cash in their tag team title shot whenever they want. They're going to do it on Full Gear because they're going to do it on Full Gear because it's in California and that's where they're from.
Oh, okay.
And, so that's why they're doing it there. Because so I was like, I'm not surprised that they had the Hung Bucks draft.
I think that I feel like at the end of the summer when I was mowing the lawn listening to Observers, they were talking about that being the plan. I just like,
yeah. And so I don't know that Ricky and Bill, I don't like the idea of them being transitional champions, but I won't be surprised if the Young Bucks win here. The Young Bucks haven't had, as much as people fuss about the Young Bucks always book themselves, and the Young Bucks haven't had the tag titles in like 2 years
really
or something
time.
like that, like something crazy like that. So I was just, as long as it's not on FTR is my whole thing. But yeah, apparently FTR is mad because they thought they were going to get the titles back, and apparently that's not the case anymore. And I don't know. It's a mess. LaRon says, Abaddon only gets TV matches around Halloween. The sad part is that almost every review of the show on YouTube has pointed this out. TK needs to do better. Yes, 100%. And Abaddon looked great. And I have said before that as much as I would like Abaddon on TV, because I think that they need to stop using the same 4 people over and over again, because I've seen Ruby Soho versus Sheeta plenty of times. But I think Abaddon would be a great fit for ROH. That's where I think that they would get, first of all, ROH typically has more women's matches. They have generally 4 or 5. They're rebuilding that division around Athena. Danhausen got really over there. Somebody, and we talked about this last week, somebody pointed out that Max the Impaler, when they were with ROH, they got really over in ROH as well. So I think Abaddon would be a really good fit. And I hope, because of the reactions that Abaddon was getting last week, that they book them more and that we see them more often. It does, Nikki. But yeah, so we were going to bring the Ric Flair stuff later, but this whole week
it happened naturally. It's fine.
It did.
Get so out of the way.
I guess we can start with.
In a way, it does actually kind of play into it, because I think one of the reasons they scrapped that thing was what was going on wrestling Twitter.
Yep.
Regarding it was because I think most people wouldn't know what the hullabaloo was, but in this case, I think online there was because of Lyric's article, I think it started a
much needed conversation that I have seen people having amongst themselves, especially because I am in some of that space. And then I also want to amplify things that are going on around me. Her article got the attention of Amanda Huber. Yep. Amanda quote tweeted it, and she also there was a situation which we will talk about in context with this whole conversation. But there was a situation with a website, and I'm going to name them. We'll go back into all of this, but there was a website who had a mass exodus of. They had about a dozen writers leave them a few weeks ago, and one of the women had her article changed. She was no longer listed as the author. They listed somebody who apparently does not exist instead of putting her name on it, and then they gave some really shitty response, and Amanda Huber called them out for it. So at least somebody in AEW was paying attention. I don't know if that translates to anything. I don't know what that will do, but I am glad to see at least Lyric's article has got the attention of at least somebody in AEW.
It got the attention of our Wrestling Observer Radio Discord channel, and we've been having a really good conversation that related to. It got related to a Hall of Fame conversation. It got related to a bunch of other things. It was kind of one of these moments where I'll actually talk to you about it later, but I think I may have landed as a future guest that will be very exciting for us because of this conversation. And I think she'll have a lot to add. And
we need more women's voices.
It's great. Like if you are in the Discord, check in on that conversation, because I will say this has been a very mature and discourse conversation. Like, and the one person who jumped in and tried to be a bad faith actor was immediately taken down by our fearless leader because he is the greatest. And the conversation continues. And I think the most important part is there's a conversation going on in our Discord because of these things.
Which is important. This is the whole reason.
That's it. That's how you do it.
Yeah, exactly. So if you miss it, so I retweeted it from to the Powerbombshells account. So it was retweeted there. I will post it again in case you missed it. I do have Lyric's article pulled up. I'm going to just kind of briefly go over some of the stuff she talked about. And so Lyric was on this very show just a few weeks ago, and she was an amazing guest. She was so much fun to talk to. She has really great insight and experiences, and I'm so glad that we were able to have her on our show a few weeks ago.
Fantastic energy. She's a huge pro wrestling fan. I made this point to a lot of people, is that that's someone we need in this space because the enthusiasm for the sport.
Yeah, exactly. I have Lyric's article here. It's called The Side Effects of Silence. And she said she would rather be writing about anything else, but because of things that are happening in wrestling media and content creation, she had to speak up. So she says, and this situation is not, of course it affects women, but in this case, it also especially affects Black women and women of color, which has always had an issue in wrestling in general. And so this is where her perspective comes from. So she said that over the past 5 weeks, we have witnessed a women's wrestling media platform. This is Women's Wrestle Talk is what she's referring to, have experienced a mass exodus of at least 10 women, almost all of whom were Black, after information came to light about shady business practices. All of these women were incredibly talented in doing the heavy lifting of writing, hosting, graphic design, social media management, conducting interviews, live coverage of wrestling events around the world, and covering a diverse array of wrestling promotions without pay. Since that mass exodus, several of the women have spoken out about attempts to blackball them from press contacts for major wrestling organizations, as well as their intellectual property being co-opted in real time. There have also been frequent examples of content theft. So this is kind of goes back to what I mentioned briefly. So there was an article written by a woman named Stephanie, and she screenshot the article, and it was listed as somebody named Sydney Cruz. Apparently, people were saying, who is Sydney Cruz? So I'm assuming this is somebody that does not exist. I'm not 100% positive on that, but regardless of who it is, or if it's a fake name that they're using, they took her work and tried to pass it off and took credit away from her, which is part of the issue that they were having to begin with. And they just came out with a crappy response of, oh, the editor didn't know who to credit it to. Well, then you contact somebody who does. Don't make stuff up. And it was just the most weakest response. And so that was one of the things that Amanda Huber called them out on, was she was like, this is not it. So then she also says, A women's only indie promotion ran by a man, this is Capital Championship Wrestling, experienced a mass exodus of women, both wrestlers and non-wrestling staff, due to discrepancies with pay, mismanagement of funds, and mistreatment of talent. I wasn't directly involved in this particular situation, but several women who were involved spoke out publicly on social media. This is the case. Capital Championship Wrestling started, I believe, I want to say earlier this year. No, maybe it was last year.
Yeah, explain this one to me because I didn't know.
So Capital Championship Wrestling is it's supposed to be an all women's promotion, but then they started bringing in men because they thought it would help sell tickets. So they didn't believe that women on their own could sell tickets, even though the promotion was to give a platform for all for women, but they brought in men as well. And so a few weeks ago, 3 champions for Capital Championship Wrestling announced their departures. Rebecca J. Scott, Christina Marie, and Ultraviolet announced that they would be giving up their titles and leaving. Another talent would eventually follow suit, with Gabby Ortiz claiming there was mismanagement with sponsorship money and talent pay. They said in a statement, in light of the recent actions taken by Capital Championship Wrestling that have greatly affected both the locker room and the fans, we've made a joint decision to relinquish our titles and take a permanent step back from CCW effective immediately. It is important to note that CCW's actions in no way reflect our beliefs. We truly apologize to anyone who's been affected and hope our actions help prevent this from happening again. CCW waited more than a week to respond. They put out a statement at 1 a.m. Eastern time, thinking that nobody would see it, I guess. And so they have
because of the time changed.
Yeah, this was Thursday. This was
okay. I thought they did it like last night or something.
No, this was like, I believe it was Wednesday at 1 a.m.
Okay.
Thursday at 1 a.m.
Yeah, I'm always on my Twitter at 1 a.m.
Sometimes I am because I'm a night owl.
I know. Actually, we'll joke when you and Nikki and your dad will be like talking at 1, but whatever.
Yeah, so I happened to, but I missed the statement. I didn't see it until right before I went to bed. So I was like, oh, well, I'll wait. And so I went back the next day and they turned off. So even better than that, they turned off the replies. So nobody could.
They did.
But you can't turn off quote tweets. And so they got called out. They got called out by talent. They got called out by sponsors who were paying money and not seeing anything in return, or they were sponsoring wrestlers and wrestlers weren't showing up. And then like one wrestler said like they had a show in Jersey and she didn't know the show was in Jersey. She thought it was still in DC. And then there was like, they never offered to pay for transportation for a lot of the wrestlers. Sometimes women would be stranded after shows and have no way to get home or to the airport. And so other wrestlers were paying out of their own pockets to help them get home. And then there was something about a sponsor not being kept in check, and I guess was wandering around in places they shouldn't have been. There was, and I didn't see everything. I think because I kept seeing references to you're not even addressing the worst of the allegations. So I don't know if there has something I missed, but they deactivated their Twitter, of course. So I did find an article that had a screenshot that has
your robot.
So, sorry. Can you?
No, it's okay. I just want you to clear it up so that we can still clip things. I'm trying to be more conscientious.
Okay. I don't know.
Well, everyone.
Am I okay now?
I think so. Keep going.
Okay, we'll find out. So the statement that they released said, we established CCW with the intention of providing a platform for talented women to showcase their abilities. We wanted to give countless skilled women who simply needed an opportunity. However, it is impossible to please everyone, and no matter how hard we try, we would like to express our respect for the 3 wrestlers who have chosen to leave CCW. Nevertheless, we made an error with one of our sponsors. We have acknowledged this mistake and apologized, and the sponsor was refunded as soon as possible, and we made good on other obligations to the sponsor. We believe in honoring our commitments and ensuring that sponsorships contribute to various aspects of our operations, including venue expenses, production costs, travel arrangements for talents, and more. However, it is crucial to emphasize that our primary focus is taking care of our talent according to agreed upon terms. Our aim is to elevate women's wrestling, and we extend an invitation to anyone who wishes to join us on this journey. We kindly request that you gather all the necessary information before taking action, as we are transparent and have nothing to hide, says the company that turned off their replies. While sponsorships are important for helping cover talent and operating costs, frankly, we do not generate any revenue. So they just admitted they make no money. And so they can't pay their talent. Instead, we dedicate a significant amount of money each month out of our own pockets to entertain our fans and ensure that everyone has a memorable experience at our shows. Our talent is not merely a statistic or booking or a booking. We consider them as part of our family, and we want them to know this unequivocally. So several wrestlers were like, if we're not a family, you're my employer, and you pay me. And then, oh, good, they did put in this tweet. So when I was reading that, I remembered Steph DeLander has wrestled there before, and so she said things that she has witnessed and experienced firsthand. Almost every female talent was guilted into working for a lower rate than usual. Posters and trading cards were created and sold using talents, names, and likeness without them knowing and not seeing a cent of the profit. After my first show, there was no hotel room for me, so I got dropped off at the airport at 3 a.m. for a 7 a.m. flight. There's $100 missing from my pay envelope. 3 women, myself and 2 Impact talent, including one current champion at the time, booked in a hotel room with 1 bed, and women working multiple matches on the show and only getting paid for 1. So,
Wow. That's
yeah.
carny AF.
Yeah. Very carny. So then
That's like so old school wrestling. It's just, it's blah, blah, blah.
And so, like, in the hours following this, I saw it because Alley Catch quote tweeted it. Some other dude was like, he owned something called, it was like Dream Pro Wrestling, some kind of crazy thing. And he was like, I don't have I run a women's wrestling promotions. I am not a money guy. I don't have a lot of money, but we'll treat you well. And if it's something about if you're interested, come work for us. And Alley Catch was like, who are you? What have you done? Who have you worked with? What other promotions have you ran? Yeah, like, how are you telling women to come work for you and nobody knows who you are? And so he's like, oh, I understand why you're questioning it. And he was like, and I don't remember, but he didn't answer the question. And the Veda Scott responded and said, you didn't answer her question. And so a couple other people said that he used to run like a couple different promotions, and apparently now he's rebranded as an all women's wrestling promotion. So it sounds like this guy is shady to begin with and is jumping on the coattails of this other women's promotion and is
trying to make money off the free talent,
right?
Basically.
And trying to don't come trust us, who you don't know anything about us, but we wouldn't do this to you. So I'm just like, what the hell are y'all doing? It's like,
yeah,
insane. So Brad says, if you can't afford to run a show without sponsorships, don't run a show. Sponsorship shouldn't be talent's pay or the go-to to promote the promoter's pockets. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Brett, like, talking from having experience dealing with some of these things where, like, you can't rely on sponsors to come through all the time. That's not, your product needs to be your product, and it needs to, I've been making this, like, and Jeff Hawkins has been banging this drum, and all of us have been kind of talking about how Tony needs to worry about Tony and needs to his own product.
Yeah.
Like, you have to build a product on the quality of your product.
Yeah.
You can't build it on gimmicks. You can't build it on fairy dust. You can't, like, it's you have to what are you selling me? What are you trying to do there? Like, how are you going to, I mean, women, like, I just got treated crappy and I'm gonna come to some like shady that can't even tell me what his product is. That's
yes. Yeah, see, and it's just so,
but it's totally safe space for women here in this.
Yeah, let me believe you.
Giant wrestling sphere that we live in, right? It's all good.
Yeah, so
we're overreacting. We're totally.
So back to Lyric's article. So I had to, because all of that was in there. So social media has never been particularly kind to women, particularly in wrestling, but the last few months have been especially cruel. I don't delude myself into thinking that the wrestling business is all sunshine and rainbows, and neither do any of the women in this space can confirm. Your favorite women's wrestlers, content creators, announcers, referees, commentators, etc., are subjected to name calling, threats, belittlement, and objectification daily for simply having an opinion. When we speak up about the biases that exist in this industry, we are told by men that with way more power than ourselves that we are too loud and too outspoken. We are told that we can exist in the space in exchange for our silence and our compliance with the status quo of pro wrestling being a man's world, even more so if you're Black on top of being a woman. We are told that our Long-term success in wrestling is not dependent upon our skill and work ethic, but our proximity to patriarchy and whiteness. The only safe and acceptable way for a woman to exist in the space is to shrink, smile, and submit to whatever scraps we're allowed to eat. And she said, what do all of these three situations have in common? Silence. Silence from the tokenized women in the space who don't speak up for others for fear of losing their positions and influence. Silence from men in the wrestling media space who don't speak up publicly because 10 women content creators, 8 of whom are Black, becoming free agents doesn't bother them enough because they've never had any intention of hiring women and women of color from their respective outlets in the first place. Silence from male wrestling promoters who don't speak up publicly about making the space safer for women because doing so would alienate the boys in the back who are raging misogynists and oftentimes creeps. Excuse me. Silence from men who carry influence in this space, who may DM a woman to ask if she's okay or to tell her that he agrees with her when he's actually with her when he sees her being called out of her name on the timeline, but refuses to lift a finger to actually defend and support her publicly. Obviously, this is not about everyone. There are many outstanding people in this space who love wrestling and facilitate healthy and equitable spaces for women and non-binary individuals. However, if you feel like any of the injustices I mentioned sound like you, this probably applies to you. And she's talking about how obviously she's not doing this for clout or followers or anything like this. She's built her platform on a loving alternative and international brands of wrestling, and she has every intention of keeping it that way. So basically, and then she goes on to say, it's not enough to say you support women in passing or behind closed doors. We need to see your support of women, who you hire, who you recommend, who you amplify, how you conduct yourself in private and in public, and how you utilize your influence should be a living example of your values. When you add in the extra barriers to entry in wrestling caused by race, it should be obvious that women of color, particularly Black women, need to be protected even more. In Black wrestling spaces, when our male counterparts have been wronged in the past, Black women have stepped up to the plate in their defense, whether it was a tweet or a spaces or some other form of public solidarity. We are now 5 weeks removed from one of the most public and massive injustices for Black women wrestling creators, and outside of a handful of folks that spend crickets, where are our hashtags, where are our spaces of solidarity, where are our public statements of support? There have been instances of non-Black women receiving public unrelenting support for issues of much lesser severity. This article is not a condemnation of anybody's character. In fact, it's a call to action. In 2023, a year where we've seen more women in wrestling bet on themselves in a way that we've never seen before, I know we can do better, and now I'm demanding it. In this crazy world of wrestling that we all love, I believe that we can all peacefully coexist and create in this space by supporting each other and not having to step on one another to get where we want to go. I believe there is a reality in a reality in our reach that exists where wrestling both in and outside of the ring is equitable, meaningful, and safe for everyone who seeks it. Let us do the work to make this reality happen.
I think it's important to point out that she says the entire time, and the conversation that I've been involved in during this week about a lot of these things is the work that people really are putting in. Is it's not that women are asking to be given these opportunities. They are working very hard to try and get them. And as one of the people in our conversation put it, is like, there's an onus on the people that operate these things to look around the room and go, is there enough voices here?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it needs to be, wrestling fandom is such a diverse place that you need writers who represent that diversity. It doesn't, and we've talked about this many times about how I've told you some of my issues with Dark Side of the Ring have always been, and I know it's because of that's just the reality of it, is the historians are always older white men. I was like, I cannot wait till we get to the point where there are historians who are women, who are in the LGBTQ community, who are people of color, who are regularly on these shows. So there's not gatekeeping from old white men all the time. And that's the thing that extends to writing spaces and content creation spaces. And this is not saying, oh, white men can't give their opinion. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that wrestling is full of diversity, and your platform should reflect that.
There are a few people out there, fortunately, that are very like open to conversation.
Mhm.
I am able to like talk to people like John Muse, and they're very supportive, and they're like happy to like give you history and talk to you about history and things like that.
Yeah, and that's
What's
perfectly
frustrating, I
fine.
think, is like you're exactly right. We don't have it yet, and people like we got into a conversation a little bit about like, well, have women written historical papers on this stuff? And it's like, well, we haven't gotten we haven't gotten there
Exactly.
yet. There isn't
Nobody's
hasn't been
given them
enough
the
of
chance
us.
to.
You
Yeah.
can't like
And that's
retroactively write history like until someone is
there
given
weren't women in those spaces to write these things.
right.
That's the
We're
point.
blazing.
We
I made
do
this
have
point earlier this week. We're blazing the trail, and that makes it tougher because like this is the first time anybody's ever asked the question about women being in this space.
yeah.
You
And
know,
that's not to say that there weren't women who were trying to be in wrestling in the 80s. It's just they
it's
weren't
just
given the
grown.
opportunity. They weren't given the opportunities. They
The internet
and
changed
even
the game.
And even if they were, men aren't going to tell them what they were doing. They're not going to tell you the shitty things they were doing to women. They're not going to tell you all of these things. And so that's why, you have wrestlers who write books and they write their autobiographies and tell their side of what happened. They weren't going to, they're even in the 90s, like they're not going to come and tell you the things that they were doing, and it's hard, and they weren't given those opportunities to begin with. And even if they were, women they weren't being taken seriously as all, because there are still the misconceptions that women are only involved in wrestling because they want proximity to wrestlers, and this because
Ring
they want to
rats.
sleep with her. Yep, they want to sleep with her wrestlers, and so they create wrestling
It's the
content
same
or they write
attitude for
articles.
female journalists in music, I'm
Yeah,
sure, in
I mean, yeah,
Hollywood,
I was gonna say it's the
certainly
same thing as women who
in
write about
sports.
baseball or any other sport, that
It's
they're not.
women in sports. They did a great piece on Real Sports. I want to say 2 years now going, where they interviewed they did a piece on what it took for women to get up, make their way up in these
Yeah.
professional sports situations. And the stories that they told, I mean, I think people need to hear them about
Mhm.
what, it's what they're subjected to. It's well, you just have to deal with getting slapped on the ass if you want the access. So,
Right.
I mean, you're in the locker room and you're in a boys sport and they're going to go ahead and it's like, yeah, it's changing though. Culture
It's
and society.
changing, it's slowly getting there, but
Civilizing yourself means evolving what you do with your community and what you
yeah.
do with and how you treat each other, and evolving your respect for groups of people that don't have
Mhm.
respect. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we again this like I hope that people kind of that aren't, if you're in the Discord, jump in there, and if you have time, give it a read, because we've had a lot of good talk about this exact thing where it's like when diversity integrating takes work.
Mhm.
Lots
You
and
have
lots
to,
and lots
like
and lots of
like
work.
like our friend Cody Rhodes says, do the work. You
Do
you
the
have
work.
to
I mean,
do
you
the
have
work.
to.
That's as simple as it is. I mean, we can call it out, but then you have to, and then she was right. Like, men, and I've had men who've reached out to me privately about certain things, and I appreciate that support, but they're not out here publicly. In some cases, some people are, and and I have people like Lauren and Brad who are great and who are really supportive of me, which I cannot thank them enough for. And they see, I mean, we've talked about it, how mad people get just because I time women's matches.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
they
Oh
think that's
man,
like that's like I have committed a crime against humanity just by demanding better for
just pointing out
women's
timing
wrestling
and
matches.
access.
All I'm doing is, and then there's like, well, you don't do this for WWE. Well, because I had to stop watching WWE because it was so bad the way they treated the women. I couldn't take it anymore. I was like,
Mhm.
I'm not doing this. And
Well, Sam, you're just you're delinquent now.
yeah, I mean,
I mean, in
I got
fairness, like
Kevin Kelly making comments
chronicle
on
of
about timing
women's
matches.
you have a chronicle of how much women have been seen in the last year, however long you did. Like, I mean, it's been a while now.
It's almost, yeah, October of this
Yeah,
year. I
so
think
like
like 3 years,
you're
2 years,
just
3 years.
becoming a historian now. Like that's one of your first chronicles. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
that's
And there were other women, and I've said this before, there were other women before me
doing
who
it
were
before
doing
you.
this, and they gave up on it, which I don't blame them, because I sometimes question why I'm still doing. I'm like, why am I even doing this? Like it's not doing anything. It's just I feel like I'm yelling into a void. But there are women before me, and it was the same reason. Like either they just didn't keep up with it anymore, or they felt the same way. They're like, it's not doing anything. Like it's
Well,
not.
life's
We're
really
just
hard. I
yelling
mean,
into the
so
void. But I've had wrestlers who have pulled me aside and have said, like independent wrestlers who have been like, people are paying attention that you don't realize they're paying attention. And they were like, keep doing what you're doing. And so
that's
that
good.
I often go back to that. And then Doc, who is a friend of mine over at Bleacher Report, he was interviewing Mercedes Martinez like a year ago, and he told her what I was doing. And she recorded this really sweet message for me and was talking about how important it was and how the work was really important that I'm doing. And so I save that and go back to that sometimes and listen
Good.
to, because it just helps me. And sometimes, I don't know how long I'll keep doing it. Maybe just one day I mean, part of it is habit, because I'm like, oh, it's a woman, I'm like, oh, and like the other day I was we were going back and we were watching Bound for Glory, and there was a match with women, and I wasn't thinking about it, and it was because it was the Collier Shot Gauntlet, and I knew women would be in it, but I was very excited to see Juventud Guerrera, and we were like talking about stuff, and I was like, and then Giselle came out, and I was like, wait a minute, so to rewind the match and restart it so I could record it, but I was like, most of the time I just do it out of habit. And it is, I mean, sometimes it is just for me to be like, oh God, this is what we're doing. And then, or I see, okay, Collision is regularly having 10-minute women's matches. Which is nice to see. Or, this, so some of it is stuff like that. And then sometimes I'm looking at ROH times and I was like, of course this match lasted 2 minutes. So it's back and forth. And, it's not like I'm doing any groundbreaking stuff over here, but it is just, yes. And again, like I said, I don't know what the end game is. Maybe, and it's funny that you mentioned that as a historian, because somebody asked me once, like a year or so ago, and they were like, have you thought about compiling this for historians to have access to? And I was like, no, they're just tweets.
I think you should. I think you'd be surprised how many other nerds there are.
That was the thing. I was like, who would buy that? Like, who would? I guess
you don't have to, like, you can have the file and print it on demand for people, or you can do what Paul does. I mean, one of the things I like about Paul's what he does with ratings is his spreadsheet is open. You can go look at it.
That's such a cool thing. Yeah.
I mean, he's been keeping that thing for freaking ever, and anybody can go look at it. It's so funny to me when these like dude bros get into like fights with him, because it's like, dude, you can go right into his Excel spreadsheet. It's right on Google. And you can check the numbers and you can run it yourself. And
and so that's kind of why I feel like, well, and see,
I like the idea of that. I mean, I would be willing to help with that, just because I think it'd be fun. And I think that at first I thought it was weird that you timed, and then I realized like what you were doing and how much it mattered, and realized like, I mean, I've learned a lot from being on a show with you. Like, I've changed a lot of my perspectives. The conversations that I've been having over this week have a lot to do with where I'm like, I think Sam would be pretty proud.
I would, and I'm glad to hear that you're having those conversations and that you're involved in it. Yeah, and like this all started out over an article where people were having conversations. It's like, who has, women aren't getting this and women are getting this, and so I was like, well, I was watching all three brands. I was watching WWE, AEW, and Impact, and so I was like, well, I'll just time it. And then I was like, okay, well, a week is not, because there was like some outlier, because I think SmackDown had like an 18-minute match, and I was like, that never happens, and I was like, so I can't. That's gonna skew my numbers. Mm-hmm. So I was like, well, I'll do it for 6 weeks. And then there was like a women's tournament was going on in Impact. They were doing the Knockouts tag team tournament. So I was like, okay, well, I'll keep going for this. Then that's when I think AEW was doing the women's tournament in Japan. So I was like, well, I'll keep it going for that. And then it got to the point where I was like, I can't, I'm out with WWE. Like, I don't like their product at all. I can't stand the way they treat women. I'm out. So I quit timing that, just stuck with AEW and Impact, which I still do. And then sometimes I'm just like, why? But then I see, because it goes to the conversation of how women are presented in both companies and how it impacts women are typically, even with their, sometimes it's just one match a week, but they're typically given a lot of time and they're given backstage segments. And we talked about that. And then every once in a while, Impact will have no women's match. It's very rare, but it happens. But they typically, even on the weeks they don't have women's matches, they're typically moving the story forward somewhere. I don't necessarily prefer it, but it, and like I said, it doesn't happen that often. It's usually once every few months. And women main event a lot there. Women have main evented multiple pay-per-views, something AEW has never done. So it's there. And I guess as long as this conversation keeps happening, maybe I'll keep timing matches, or we'll see.
I think what I would say is, for in terms of like Lyrics article, is that I would say, at least in my experience this week, she started a conversation that needed to be had, and I think it's good, and I hope that a lot of women who felt doubt this week feel a little spark of hope to know that there's a lot of people talking about this, and the only consensus and conversation is what changes the narrative. That's what changes the discourse. That's what points out some of the things I said to people were like very simple things that it's like, we all have these indoctrinated sort of like in our brain, like I do it too, and where our reaction is inherently to be meek as a woman and to be dominant and or whatever. I mean, I'm way oversimplifying, but
no, I know I get your point.
but it's like the idea of being able to cross-examine yourself and go, oh my gosh, I do it too. I didn't even realize that was something that was insulting or something that like was kind of like almost a stereotypical meme argument that people in that situation get all the time. Like, well, we talked about women on our thing, and it's like, okay, were there women there?
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, please, if you're going to have a conversation about women, please bring on a woman.
But I mean, but that's okay, because I think that if you have the right people in the right sphere, unfortunately, Fight Game Media Network is full of people that are like we're having a conversation, not a it's not a trolling.
This is what needs to happen.
It's a real, honest, open. Like, I love this network so much because I love the people in it, because they can actually have, for the most part, rational, reasonable discourse.
Yeah.
And it's so rare to find that anywhere, and it's very appreciated. And I shout out to all you guys, like, felt very supported in there this week.
Good.
Very
happy to hear.
They were great. And so everybody's been great.
Yeah, some of the conversation that I had, or like I've seen, like because of what Lyric was talking about, and how there have been women who have said that, I've thought about, I don't know what I've questioned my space here, or do I deserve, and I've questioned it myself. Like, that's happened to me, that I'm like, am I making a difference? Is anybody even listening? And so I've felt those doubts myself. And so I'm very glad that women have come forward. And I had quote tweeted Lyric's article, and somebody quote tweeted me, we don't follow each other. And she was like, this is why I'm not in the wrestling space. It's too negative. I just felt like I'd see the way other women are treated, and I don't create wrestling content, I found. And so I responded to her, and I was like, I completely get it. There are times myself that I don't even want to create content. And sometimes I don't, it's like, what's the point? But just because the way that it's reacted to. And so, but she did tell me that she found the content creation that she does for something else. And she said that she loves doing that. And so I'm glad she found that outlet. But then I had a fellow writer that we write together. Well, she's not writing as much anymore, but we were writing together at another website. And she was telling me, she was like, this is 90% of why I've cut back 90% of my writing, is she was like, because of the reaction that women get in this space. And she was like, and because of, she was like, she was like, I have a very small account. And she did have an example of this, like a few weeks ago. She said something about something that was going on in NXT, and then a very big account said, I don't think they stole it from her, but they said literally almost the exact same thing she said, and the tweet blew up because they have a very large following and she has a
Right.
very small following, so nobody saw it. And so, it is disheartening. So then she's like, well, what's the point? And it came from a man. And so now they're listening. And it came from an account with thousands of followers. So now people are listening, even though I've been saying this publicly on my own platform for
Activate
weeks.
man voice.
Right. And so it is frustrating. And then I did have, which I was really nice. And so I was just saying, but I had one of my editors publicly said, he was like, you belong here, and so do all the other women in this space. And so that
Nice.
was a really nice thing to have. And so it is a conversation, like I said, it's a conversation that needs to happen. I have experienced in some of it just being as a woman, and then I have seen it happening playing out by women I follow who are women of color. I've seen it play out with women who are in the LGBTQ community as well. And so it all should be called out. And and like Grace says, that the only way to affect change is to talk about difficult situations, which is true.
It.
Yes, and I do want to go back to this comment. There's nothing wrong with sponsorships, just choose them wisely. Yeah, 100%. Like I have no problem with it, but there's got to be certain rules and things like that. There needs to be a lot of transparency because, there's been plenty of places that use sponsorships, and like even Wrestling Revolver, they use sponsorships all the time. Like they have a sponsor, Swerve City podcast sponsors their replays. So whenever they show a replay, like they sponsor it and they throw up the Swerve City podcast logo and things like that. So that's not an issue. And like there was like GCW had that 24-hour show where they had 24 hours straight matches, and so they had all kinds of sponsorships and stuff like that to keep it going. And so and I agree, I don't think there's anything wrong with sponsorships. It's just how you use them and if they're where they're going to, because some people have like where you can sponsor wrestlers directly and the 100% of the funds go to the wrestlers. And you can, so some people could do sponsor a wrestler versus sponsoring a show, or some people will sponsor a match. So there's various ways. And I think as long as people are open and transparent about where that money is going and who's involved and what's expected, then I think that I don't see there being an issue with it. But
we watch on network television. We watch relying on sponsorship.
Yeah.
So if we're going to be watching television, we're going to be watching ads, we're going to be watching sponsorships. That's how these things go on television. I'm going to go watch the NFL in a little while, and every 45 seconds there's going to be an ad with Peyton Manning in it, and I don't need that in my life, but here we are.
No, me neither.
But it's I don't know, it's fine. The fact that they had to go through the whole rigmarole of like having an energy drink and having a sponsorship and having the sponsorship cover his salary and all these other like gimmicks that they had to do it with kind of speaks to like where you stand, like what you are what is true about the person that you're signing on here. And it's like, well, no, there's this gimmick that goes with it and it's only for this long. And there's a lot of like silly shit that's surrounding it that is making it just like, what you're doing is crap and you're doing it anyway.
Yeah.
and that's fine. I mean, I guess good. I just don't have to like spend a lot of extra time on some of that. And I can finally get caught up on like Tag League and stuff. And I'll go back to. I always have New Japan, no matter what. That's the thing, is that in my heart, it's my A promotion, so it's fine. I'll be fine. But I love having an alternative to WWE, and I hate that. I hate the threat
so much that anymore.
I hate the threat of that not existing because of what it's done for wrestling.
I think it's very premature to think that this company is not going to be here just because of a few bad things. But
sure,
I do think they need to course correct as soon as they can.
Trends or trends though.
Yeah, I think they need to.
It's starting to trend the wrong way.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They got to course correct, and signing Ric Flair to a multi-year contract the day after you announce a Paul White match is not course correction.
It's a choice.
It's a choice. And again, this is nothing against Paul White, and this is just because he was the most recent involved with this. And I'm not totally against the Paul White thing. I just don't. There's just certain things that they should be doing. And when you already are having the conversation of people who are not invested in your product as much anymore, then there's some things to reconsider. And you're going into year 5. And of course, and we've said this from the beginning, AEW is not perfect. No company is. They're never going to be perfect, but you need to start listening and get your head out of the sand. And one thing that seemed to be maybe trending in the right direction was, and sticking with women's wrestling, AEW put out an ad on social media, and I think it was from Warner Brothers. So it featured various women. It had Saraya, Britt Baker, Willow, Ruby. I feel like there might have been, I don't think Sky Blue was, Chris Statlander. She was in it as well. And Sheeta, I believe, is also in it. So they put out this really cool looking ad. The women all look really badass. And then the song that's playing is fine. But the song is by an artist named Doja Cat, which would be great. Doja Cat is a really big get. She's one of the bigger artists of the last couple of years. She's had some really big hit songs. A lot of people in the 18 to 34 bracket know exactly who that is. Probably listen to her music. The only thing is Doja Cat is quite a questionable person. So not necessarily someone you want to have associated with your company. And so that turned, like, I thought the ad was really cool. I was like, oh, look at the way they're look at the way they're presenting the women. This looks really cool. Maybe didn't show it on Dynamite that night. Like, why are you not putting this on TV? It's like, so Doja Cat, for those who are not familiar, she's a
I had to read up on this, Sam. I'm so out of touch. I felt like such an old lady this week.
As soon as I saw that, now I was like, no, not Doja Cat.
I'm so glad you linked me the article. I
linked it. Yes, that's why I linked it, so that you would know what I was talking about.
God, she linked me this article, and then I had to go do research on Doja Cat. And and I'm just like, this is the world of like YouTube influencers and teenage like craziness and younger and teens and 20s and the whole thing now is like, I'm so far removed. It's just, it's like, I tried to be like, remember how silly you were at that age?
she's a very big top pop star right now. Like, so in that perspective, like, it's really good that they got, and I'm assuming this is a Warner Brothers thing. They probably have contacts with her label and things. And so I sent it to the group text, and Nikki wasn't at home. Nikki was putt sitting, and she saw it, and she was like, ooh, Doja Cat. So, because she knows. So Doja Cat has a long list of questionable things. Like, she apparently hates her fans. She got, like, there was a big thing a few months ago on Twitter. She blew up at them, and she told them that her last 2 albums were cash grabs and they were idiots for falling for it and spending money buying her albums. Then they call themselves kittens, and she doesn't like it and thinks that they're stupid and that they need to get lives. And she just, like, trashing her own fans. She lost like something like 300,000 followers after this happened. And somebody pointed out, and they were like, I know self-sabotage when I see it. And I was like, and that's what I keep thinking. And I was like, that's what that kind of sounds like. But then, like, there's been other things. Like, she apparently used to hang out in like 4chan chat rooms and was like saying some questionable racist things, and not, and maybe it was to fit in with these people. I don't know. Then, if, like, I'm assuming this particular situation probably happened. I don't know when this was filmed, so it could have been, this could have happened after it was filmed. But she took a picture of her. She took a selfie, and she's wearing a shirt of this man who is holding a weapon. And apparently this guy is an alt-right comedian. He has ties to neo-Nazis, and she's just proudly wearing his shirt, and her fans called her out on it and was like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why would you do something like this? So then she reposted the photo, cropped her shirt, and then the caption was emojis of someone rolling their eyes. Yeah. So she's not like the worst person in the world that you could put. She's very questionable. She's made questionable.
I mean, why would you pay a professional troll?
Yeah, right.
Like, and so why would you over your money to somebody that's just literally like, influencer, fine, I guess. That just seems like I mean, you just found the angle for being a professional troll, honey. You have like won the internet. Congratulations. Being a total butt waffle. I don't know, like just oh my god. Can't
Yeah,
say the words that I'm
Brad
thinking
said
in
Sam
my
had to
head.
fill me in on her. Yeah, so I tweeted the art because I knew I was like, I don't know what people know. I see things because a lot of times it's just trending, and I do
Right,
work
you have
with music
music
in my
ties
day
though.
job, so I'm familiar. Like Doja Cat had a song on the Elvis soundtrack. She had a really big song that was on radio that was
Oh,
from the
okay.
Elvis soundtrack. Doja Cat has had some really big songs over the last
I'm
couple of
sure
years.
if
Like,
you played me one that was pretty popular, I've heard it
yeah, and this
before.
it's
I'm
funny.
terrible at that with every band anyway. Like that's just universal.
The
Every artist,
song
every
that it
band.
ad I heard on the radio 2 days ago. So it's a current single that's out there. And again, so that's why I tweeted the article because I knew people were going to ask. So I went and found because I couldn't remember when I first saw it. I was like, is it just that she hates her fan or is there other stuff? So then I went and did some digging and I was like, that's right. Okay. Yeah. So she did have that. There was the thing about the alt right comedian. And then there's been some questionable behavior. And she was apparently dating somebody that was questionable. And she was like, well, I don't give a shit about my fans' opinions. I'll never listen to them. And so, like, I was like, sounds like a former AEW women's champion.
This just
to fit. But yeah, so I tweeted the article and was just like, I get the intent. I think it looks really cool. The artist they use is questionable. Somebody probably didn't do their research, or I'm assuming this last thing that happened probably happened, after it was filmed. I don't know, but I haven't. But they didn't put it on. They didn't even bother putting it on TV. And I was like, why go through all this effort for Twitter or social media? Like, why is this ad not on TV? And I'm sure it's not.
I mean, I guess they're trying to capture that age group because that's who
Right. Well, yeah,
populates that space. I mean, that
but
would
you should
be
put that on TV. People if they're walking by and the TV's on and they hear Doja Cat, they're probably going to stop and
yeah,
turn
they'll
around and
stop.
see. They'll be like, "Oh, why do I hear Doja Cat? Why is she on TV?" And they'll be like, "Oh, well, who are these women?" Like you would think, but I don't know. Brad liked your term butt waffle and he says he's using that now.
I can't say the words that I was thinking, but you're welcome to it. I
Subscribe. Use your own meaning for butt waffle.
it's good. It's good. I used to have to censor myself when I was working with children at all the different times. So I used to come up with amazing words to deflect ever. I don't think in my entire career, I don't think I ever accidentally dropped any bombs on any kids. So I think I was pretty good.
Yes.
You'd have me like saying like all kinds of gibberish and stuff, but never actually schnitzel. I mean, it's that kind of thing. But yeah, I was sitting here listening to you and I just realized Tony's totally sold out, Sam. He totally sold out. He signed Ric Flair.
I think this is
He's like, it's got his nostalgia show. He signed Ric Flair. He's got Doja Cat with the chicks on the show. He's a sellout now. Totally sold out. This isn't the AEW we know and love.
I think the Doja Cat thing is a Warner Brothers call, probably, because they're like, oh, let's make the women look like a big deal, which they should. But I was like, they didn't do very much research. They probably went like, who is one of the most popular singers right now? Doja Cat. Okay, let's contact her people. And I'm sure that was the extent of it. I'm sure nobody
you're probably right.
Warner Brothers PR probably wasn't like,
oh, they don't give
maybe she's a little questionable. Maybe we should find someone else.
I think you're right. I mean, I don't think people like that give because they don't. It's all business with them. They don't care.
Yeah.
It's that sort of thing is irrelevant. That doesn't affect the bottom line.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. So, I mean, it was really cool as far as like if you take away the questionable person singing the song. I mean, there was a little bit of.
I wish they could have featured.
There's a little bit. There was too much Soraya for my personal liking. But it was a really cool ad. It presented the women really well. I think they should put it on TV, and then do something with their women.
The boom would say it should have been on Dynamite. What the F?
Should have been on Dynamite. Yep, it should have been. Like, why are you going to go through all that effort and just put it on social media? Especially because like I said, that's a song that's currently on the radio. Like I had the radio on a couple days ago and it came on and I was like, oh, that's the song because it's one of her bigger songs. It's called Paint the Town Red. Like this is a song that's on the radio. Like act like people would, if it's on TV, people would stop and be like, why do I hear this song?
Yeah.
And they would either stop flipping the channel or they'd come back and look to see what it was, which is what you want. That's the whole point. But you're not putting it on TV apparently. And again, I don't think they're not putting it on TV because they're like, oh, Doja Cat's questionable because they made the ad and put it out anyway. I think they're just
but they made the ad and they hired Ric Flair. I think like how much worse do you like? It's I think at this point it doesn't like matter, right? I mean,
this is like the least. That is like the least using Doja Cat in a AEW commercial is like the least questionable thing they did last week.
Yay.
Listen, at this rate, putting Paul White on TV and putting him in a match with Kota Ibushi and Kenny Omega is like the least controversial thing that they did, and they're like out of all of the things that doesn't look so bad now. I don't think it looked that bad to begin with. I get people.
No, I hear you, but I you know when the sum of the parts that kind of comes out at the top.
You know what? Paul White being in a match on Dynamite 2 weeks really doesn't look so bad.
Let's go.
Listen, if my choices are seeing Paul White on TV and Ric Flair, then I'm gonna go with Paul White.
Paul White every time.
Bring me Captain Insano.
Yeah.
So we will get to some wrestling stuff that happened this week. So we did have this very interesting thing that is playing out with Willow and Julia and Sky Blue, and Chris Statlander is a little bit of a part of it too. And so we've been wondering for the past few weeks, like what's going on. Like Willow's eye makeup is a little dark some weeks, some days it's not. Sometimes her gear is darker, sometimes it's not. She seems to be resisting the mist, as Mel put it.
Yeah, it's a little weird on the title list. But what am I
hey, no, it works. So we've not really seen where Sky Blue stands with this because Sky is she has been a lot darker. She's not very chill. She has like the very bright Scooby-Doo inspired gear, but then she doesn't reflect that. Her demeanor doesn't reflect that. Like she's very like she still has the dark eye makeup. Now the blue is completely gone from her hair. She had been fading and now it's completely gone, and she's just a little more aggressive. And then so it seemed like there's going to be a very obvious heel turn, except that's not what we saw, at least right away. So Julia comes back from her honeymoon. She comes out there and she is coming for Willow, and Sky Blue runs out, stops her, stands in between them, and then uses her own blue mist, which doesn't really do anything except for make Julia blue and make her mad. And so and she's like, she's, clearly has Willow's back. So then last night on Collision, we see, or no, I think Sky wrestles. Yeah, so Sky wrestles and she's still doing, she still has she doesn't have her normal happy demeanor. She's still the same. So doing the mist has not, misting Julia has not turned Sky Blue back into her normal self. Then there was a backstage segment on Collision last night where it was Sky, Willow, and Chris. And Chris is talking to her. And she's like, I'm so proud of you for what you did and standing up to Julia. And she was like, I didn't do this for you. She was like, Willow is my friend and I did it for her. And Willow's like, oh, that's so nice. I thank you for doing that. And then Sky leaves and Chris is like, well, I'm her friend too. So it feels like maybe Sky has not completely, she's not completely resisted the mist, I guess. It seems like she's not
as strong as Willow.
Right. She's not as strong as Willow. She did the right thing and stepped up for her friend. However, her demeanor is still the same. So Sky, it seems like, so maybe Julia uses that against her. Like Julia can see she's not completely back to her normal self. Maybe I can still convert her and bring her over to my side. I've seen people complain about the idea of, because they think it's Jimmy Jacobs, because Jimmy Jacobs is backstage in AEW. He used to be a backstage writer in Impact. He was involved in the Coven storyline over there. As soon as he left, the Coven disbanded. I don't have an issue with that type of stuff. And like as much as I love Julia kind of being the de facto leader of House of Black. Like I think
Yeah, I
it's
kind of
really
like
cool.
that
I think it's a
too.
lot of fun. However, I kind of like the idea of Julia being leading her own faction,
A women's
especially because
faction.
the Outcasts were such a bust.
Yeah.
That ended up being such a terrible thing. Like I kind of like the idea of Julia and Sky Blue, and maybe I like Willow as a babyface. I think Willow could be a really good heel. I don't necessarily want to see her as one, but I think Willow's just that good that she could. But we
Agree with
also
that.
talked about how it's kind of like Johnny Gargano when they try to make him a heel. Johnny Gargano is a natural babyface, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like Willow would be the same way.
Mhm.
But I wouldn't mind Julia kind of leading her own faction of women, or maybe they bring Sky Blue over to House of Black or something and have people. I think women's tag team titles are a terrible idea. However, if they do that, then Julia and Sky Blue as a tag team with Willow and Chris as a tag team could be kind of a cool thing, like if they did it, but if it's done right. But like we've talked about many times, like every time there's something promising in the women's division, I'm always cautiously optimistic because it generally falls apart. And so so it was a really interesting. I didn't expect this. I guess a swerve, but it seems like Sky has not fully committed. Like she could still be swayed into Julia's side of things, which I guess is kind of fun because then we can see that maybe that's kind of like the battle of good and evil. Like, are you going to turn? Like, is Willow going to be able to save her friend, or is Julia going to succeed? And so it could be an
that would
interesting
be a
storyline.
storyline.
Yeah.
It's time on TV. It's a storyline, and it develops these characters, starts to develop women's characters. I'd love a women's faction. That would be the greatest thing in the entire world. Like,
yeah, because like they started to have one. Remember, they started to have one with the baddies, and it was like Jade
and the
and
baddies was
Layla,
okay, but they were more like Dalton Castle's boys. Although the boys wrestled more than the baddies did.
Yeah, this is true. And we see, and Red Velvet's coming back on Wednesday. She's having a match on Dynamite. It's her first match in like I think 9 months, something like that. So I'm glad to see. And Layla has been used some in ROH, so she's still around and active. And so, like, I'm glad to see Red Velvet coming back because they need some more. They need to quit focusing on the same women over and over. And Brad said during the picture-in-picture on the fight feed, fans started a Scooby Snack chant at Sky Blue. I was grossed out by that. Yeah, that's a little. I get where they're going with it, but it's a little gross. But male fans are very weird with Sky. They objectify her a lot, which I know, but they say things to her at the shows. So. Brad says, I love Julia with Brody. The visual is so awesome. I do too, Brad. I love them together.
They're making it work.
Yeah, and it's so, and I think part of it's because it's so natural. Because like we've talked about before, Julia has said that Brody has become her wrestling dad, and when she switched into this character, him and his wife took her shopping to find gear to help her become this version of herself, and like he's kind of become like her protector on the road.
I love that. See,
her husband,
it does,
like,
and it makes it feel authentic, which is what you want.
Yeah. Definitely. And Vinikin says, meanwhile, Riho is missing again. I think she's back in Japan, but yeah, she just comes and goes. And it sounds like, I feel like I read recently that Yuka Sakazaki is finishing up with, I think TJP. Is it TJPW? She's finishing up wherever she's at, and it sounds like she will be in the US more often. And I really hope so, because Yuka is great. But I would love to see more Riho because she's amazing and she should be on TV all the time. That would be really great. Apparently the sun has moved behind the clouds and made me get dark all of a sudden. Or maybe I am being affected. Maybe I'm being affected by the mist. So
you won't get out of your area into mine, because now it's like getting brighter here for a second. So I don't know.
Brad says Riho has her main work in Japan, so she likes to stay there. That's what I thought, that she was splitting time and was spending more
I
time
think she
there. The
struggles
more,
when she's in America. I get it. It's a huge culture shock, but I think
yeah.
she struggles
Well,
when
and she
she's
has
here.
a whole life over there too, and she's
Yeah.
doing all of these things, and it's hard because I mean that's why like Sheeta when she was gone for a while is because she was doing a lot of stuff in Japan too, and she does her acting and all kinds of stuff. Brad said Yuka should be coming over full time in December or January. Yeah, I think I remember reading that. So I'm
Cool.
really glad to see
I
that.
love her.
Vinkin says Yuka versus Mizuki in TJPW earlier this year was pretty good. That
Nice.
sounds like it was really good. Yeah, I would like to see. Yeah, if they can utilize Yuka more, I would love that.
Yeah,
Really
she's great.
enjoy her. So I think is there anything else you want to talk about with AEW before we move over to some New
No,
Japan
I think
stuff?
that's it. I think that we're good
Okay.
to go.
So we may have to have, I don't know, Nikki and I were talking about this later or last night. You might have to, I don't know if you'll have to get the spoiler alert graphic ready
Do I
for
have
some of the,
to?
for
You
some of
think
the
so? All
stuff with
right, let's do it. Let me see if I
maybe so for people who've not been able to watch New Japan Power Struggle yet.
feel like it's
There,
everywhere, but you're right. I will
it
go ahead and
probably
do this.
is
Because I didn't even
somehow.
watch Power Struggle, but this is oh wait, let me get rid of the banner here
So
so that
people,
everyone
if you were listening on audio, we are putting up a spoiler alert graphic. If you have not seen New Japan Power Struggle and have missed some of the stories, you may just want to stop listening and come back.
All
So
right, I'm gonna
we're
move
getting
it
ready
now.
to go into this.
All right.
So it's interesting because I saw some of the spoilers, but then the stuff that happened at the very end of the show, I didn't hear about at all. Like I didn't know until I watched myself. I didn't get to watch the full show. I watched the matches that I was interested in. Brad said this show was awesome. The ones that I saw were really good. Oh, wait, I didn't see this question until just now. So before we get fully into the New Japan stuff, I want to answer this question from Jeff. It says, how do you feel about Angelo Parker and Ruby Soho thing? Remind me of Greece. I can't tell about I don't know how I feel about it. I like both of them. It just
yeah, you
feels
know what? That's
it's kind of weird. Like it just kind of came out of nowhere, but I guess that's the point. And it could turn into something really cool. And I want 2.0 to just go and do their own thing. I want Daniel Garcia by himself. Like I'm really excited that he's getting this match with MJF. I want Daniel Garcia to quit being a sports entertainer. As much as I enjoy the dancing, I want him away from that. And I want 2.0 doing their
you're
own
not allowed to
thing.
like dancing, didn't you know?
So, okay. Brad said apparently they're dating and they're bringing it to TV. See, I thought Angela was married, and so that's why I wasn't sure what was happening.
Maybe he's not married anymore.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
I have no idea. I am very, very like hands off when it comes to people's personal lives.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, I think it could be cool. I like that Ruby like gets annoyed with him. Like she's just like, what are you even doing? And then she just kind of like laughs him off, and then he just like keeps coming back, but not in like a weird creepy way of he's like not getting it. Like it seems like, yeah, so far it's really interesting. I'm curious to see what it's going to lead into. It just is very, yeah, it's very weird, but it does have a Grease type of feel to it.
That's a really good comparison,
especially with the jacket, and he's got the comb. It does have a Grease type feel to it, and Ruby could fit into that Pink Ladies type of like where she's the Rizzo of the group. And she's the badass that you don't mess with. So I think
you
it
get
could be
Rizzo versus the Tony Storm.
Yeah, there we go.
You could get like Ruby Soho's like Grease version, or the Pink Lady, the Rizzo versus because that'd be fun.
They need to do something with Ruby. Ruby's too good to be stuck the way she's been.
That'd be an okay thing, actually, honestly, because I mean, having something in that way, I mean, you could do that. It might be a little dated. I don't know if people would get into it, but maybe they would in the way that they're getting into.
Grease TV show on. There was a Grease TV show that was on Freeform. I think it was last year.
Okay.
And so it could potentially some of that demographic may get the references because of that TV show. I think the show's been canceled, but I think it was because of the strike stuff and all that.
Yeah.
So it could be something. It's really interesting, and especially now that I'm thinking about it, because Saraya was blaming Ruby for she was being really mean to her and was blaming her for being obsessed with Tony and like saying that she cost her a match and like was so it seems like Ruby could just be like, fine, I'm just gonna go with Angelo Parker over me and Cool Hand and you're gonna we're gonna go to Rydell High School over here and do our own thing. Nikki says that she thinks that Grease show was on a streaming platform, but maybe it was on Freeform too. Yeah, I can't remember which one it was. But so we will go back to the New Japan stuff. But before we got too far, I wanted to answer that question. Yeah, so from what I saw, like I've not been keeping up with New Japan as much as I had been, just because everything is happening at once. And I try to keep up with, speaking of Strong Style, and I had planned to listen. I planned to listen on Thursday, then some real life things happened, and then I was going to listen. Actually, was supposed to get a tattoo finished yesterday, and so I was like, "Oh, perfect! I will watch." I will watch Speaking of Strong Style while I'm listening, and then it turns out my tattoo the red part is still healing, and I couldn't have my tattoo worked on, and so there went that idea. So I have there, and I have, if you're on this YouTube channel, please and make sure you're subscribed, or if you're on the $10 tier of Patreon, you can also listen to the audio version. They went live twice this week. They had their normal show, and then yesterday they did their review of Power Struggle. So definitely go check that out. Now that I have seen Power Struggle, I'm definitely going to go back and because I want to hear their reactions to some things, especially the the ending stuff. I really want to know what they think about that. But hi, Jacob.
Hello.
So yes. Well, that's possible too. Jeff says, what if this leads to Saraya getting frustrated and joining Penelope and Allie like Charlie's Angels, 3 women? That could maybe they could mix that. Listen, the more women who get on TV, the better. So if that's what gets people on TV, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I mean I was gonna say that when we were talking about Ruby, is like if it means she's gonna be on television more, sure. Yeah, whatever it takes. I mean, they bought her, they purchased her, they brought her in. She's a huge name. They need to use her. Like she's got that song for when she comes back to being normal. Like, I mean,
and I think she should be TBS champion. I think she should have been TBS champion before. She should have taken it off of Jade when Chris got hurt, especially because Jade beat Ruby to become champion. So I always thought it would have made sense for Ruby to take it from Jade, and that they could have done that until Chris got back. And now that Chris is back, then Ruby, I think, would be someone could take it off of her if they're moving Chris if they end up moving her next year into the main title picture, then I think Ruby should be the TBS champion.
I mean, in theory, they should be moving Chris into the main title picture. So that's probably a good idea because Ruby's a good champion to hold it. She can help people around her. I mean, she could elevate a lot of people potentially.
Yeah, and she's been a champion before in WWE, so it's not like. And so I think it would be smart to put it on her.
Yeah, I'd be into that. I would enjoy that, I think.
Yeah. So. Yes. And so we'll get back into the New Japan stuff. Well, the YouTube comments are on a delay, so it sometimes takes us a minute. It won't show up for us, and we've moved on to the next thing. So that's why we're kind of jumping back around. And if anything else comes through, we'll just save that for the end so we can stick on the New Japan stuff. So did you watch any of Power Struggle?
I didn't watch it, but don't worry about it because I was talking about it with my friend. So.
Okay. So I only watched a handful of things. So we started with the trios match between Tana, Ishii, and Okada versus TMDK, mainly because I thought, apparently I misread. I was trying to avoid spoilers, but something I read, I thought TMDK won the titles. They did not. It was
Oh,
still a really good
bummer.
match, but that's how I was like, "Oh, well, I wanna watch," because,
Yeah.
TMDK, like, I love those guys. The match was really great, so I'm glad I watched it anyway. It was a lot of fun. I really TMDK nearly got the win a couple of times, and so I thought that and so that was why I was like, "Oh, I did read the correct thing," and then that didn't happen, and I was like, "Okay, well, I was wrong. I clearly read the wrong." I was like trying to scroll past things, so that must have been where it came through. But yeah, the match was a lot of fun. Tana, Okada, and Ishii did retain, so that'll be interesting to see how much longer. I assume they'll hold it through Wrestle Kingdom at the very least, and then or New Year Dash or something like that. I could see maybe they drop it at if they retain through Wrestle Kingdom, maybe they drop it at New Year Dash and kind of
Yeah,
set off
yeah.
the
Just
next
start
set of
the new year
storylines.
and like get things
Um,
going. The kickstart.
yeah, and Brad says, um, the 6-man match was great. One of the best ever open weight title matches they've had. Yeah, that
Nice.
match was a lot of fun. And it was like they were talking about because they had so this show was Walker. They had Walker and Chris Charlton together. So Walker is the guy who will be replacing Kevin Kelly when Kevin Kelly goes to AEW full time next year after following
Wrestle
following
Kingdom.
New Year Dash.
New Year's Dash.
Yeah, and so he's
Yeah.
done. I haven't had a chance to watch the New Japan show from last week, but he was on that. Heard a lot of really good things about him. So that was last night was the first show that I've really heard him call. And they had partway through this show, they brought Robbie Eagles in, and Robbie is great. He gave
He's so
he gave
good on the mic.
yeah,
with
he's a
them.
lot of fun on commentary and he gives a lot of insight. And I think he just really helped that out. And it's going to take some time for Chris. Like, I thought Chris and Walker did okay together, but I mean, it took Chris and Kevin a while to kind of gel. And then Chris got to where he was just really comfortable. And now he just says whatever he wants. And it's a lot of like, I love Chris Charlton. And so,
yeah,
and I
I
really
love where Kevin Kelly did him such a service, like really working
Yeah.
him out of his shell and getting him into, because he's great. He's got a lot to offer.
Yeah. He's yeah, I really like Robbie Eagles too, and he's a lot of fun. And so, yeah, Walker seems like he's going to be a good fit. He's really knowledgeable of the product, which is really nice. Like, he knows what he's talking about. And Chris kind of filled in the gaps where he needed. They were both referencing Chris Samsa, which was really cool because that was kind of Kevin Kelly's thing. And so Walker was referencing some stuff. Chris was as well. And so I thought it was really good. I thought they did a good job. And then I believe Walker will be doing that was his first trip to Japan, and he's flying home and will be doing English commentary for World Tag League. I believe he's doing World Tag League by himself, I believe is what he said. Brad said, I love Kevin Kelly, but I was so happy Chris and Walker didn't get into the commentary like Chris and Kevin have done recently. Yeah, Walker seems to be kind of on, like, he knows when to joke, but he seems to be like very much calling it like straight down the middle, like he's no nonsense. Yeah, and not to say that he doesn't know how to joke or anything like that. And I think some of that'll come when he gets more comfortable. But it blows my mind that he's 21 years old. Like, that's insane. He's calling for one of the biggest promotions in the world at 21. It's insane.
Part of me is like, I mean, I'm really sad, but I think, things change all the time. So I hope that they do
and
well.
Kevin has said, like, this is what his wife wanted. His wife wanted him
and that's the other thing I was going to say is like, I am all the credit in the world to him, because he's like, my wife wants her husband home. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And the one thing I think will be really good about this is now Kevin can focus completely on AEW, because sometimes when he is talking, it sounds like the only time he watches AEW is when he is calling Collision. Like, it sounds like he sometimes doesn't. And I know it's a lot. And so that's why I was like, well, I'm glad that AEW will be his focus, because then he can maybe watch more of the product than just Collision.
I bet that he will, especially once, like, because when you're not on a plane and all over the place like that, and you're not and you're like at your house and settled, you start to have he will need time to fill, and that is probably the best time to. Too bad there's not a place where I can stream AEW previous freaking episodes.
Yeah, right.
That'd be great.
Nikki said, I wonder how Gino says Walker definitely does not is the same as Kevin.
Kevin.
Given. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Maybe he'll come up with a way to say Walker.
I can't
That's
wait
just
to
as
have
fun.
Gino back. I love
I
the
know. I was
Gino.
thinking about that last night. I was like, man, I miss Gino. I'm ready for him to come back for
Yeah,
a little bit.
sure how
And that's nothing
much
against
maybe gonna-
nothing against Walker. But yeah, so
All right. Yeah.
I watched that. Then I think we skipped ahead to Haramu versus Ishimori, because Ishimori came back a few weeks ago. That was, of course, I knew it was going to be a really good match. They always have good matches together, and it was a lot of fun. I didn't realize, again, because I've not been keeping up with New Japan as much, I didn't realize that Haramu is going for 2 records. He's going for one of most consecutive defenses in, I don't know if it's most consecutive defenses in a year or most consecutive defenses in a title reign or something like that. Brad may be able to clarify. And then he's also going for I believe he's also going for the longest reigning champion, or the junior of the IWGP junior. Yeah, love that one. Not overall, but for that title. And so I was like, oh, this makes sense, because I had seen that Haramu won before I watched it, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize he was going for all of these things. And so they had a really great match. And then afterwards, Haramu he got on the mic and he told because Despy was on commentary for the Japanese commentary, and he was like, I want to wrestle you. He was like, I want to wrestle you. And he was like, Despy's just sitting there at commentary like, what? And Robbie Eagles said, I thought he's like, I'm sitting right here. Just you quietly hear, I'm sitting right here. I was like, poor Robbie. And so, I think this was also Robbie told like the worst dad joke that made Chris Charlton groan, because he was like, you're talking about these defenses, and then he was in defense because Ishimori, he threw him into the barricade. And Chris Charlton groaned at him. I was like, Robbie, that joke was terrible.
Okay, that's worth listening to just to hear Chris Charlton groan at a crappy dad joke.
I was like, he was like, not even responding to this.
He's
this
like,
I can't joke.
I now know what it means to can't even.
Yeah, really. Yeah, so he calls out Despy. Despy gets in the ring and said that he was in, I can't remember if he said he was having surgery or if he's having something and he can't wrestle, but he will be cleared for Wrestle Kingdom and he'll be ready to go. So he accepted the Wrestle Kingdom match, but then he said something like, don't fall. I think he said something like, don't make sure that Taguchi doesn't get this title in the meantime or something like that. And so the reason I was surprised by Despy and how I knew that Haramu won is because Speedball quote tweeted it and said that he was always watching. And so I was like, oh, did he call out Speedball? Apparently not, but apparently Speedball is keeping an eye on what Haramu was doing. So that was fun. Oh, and I think this match happened before, and I don't know how I forgot the order, but so I did watch. Thank you, Venkin. He clarified. Despy accepted, but he won't wrestle any show because of injuries. Thank you for clarifying that for me. So I did watch Jon Moxley versus Greatest Okan, which was fantastic. So they start brawling like immediately within like 2 or 3 minutes. It was a double count out. And Jon Moxley was pissed. He was like, He was like, we're finishing what we started. So he's like, give me a mic. And he was like, we're doing a falls count anywhere in Osaka. And I was like, anywhere in Osaka? I was like, are you leaving? Y'all gonna go brawl in the city?
Like, they would love that in Osaka.
Yeah, that's what they said. They were like, Osaka is the most violent city, but the place that loves violence the most, or something like that. And they brawled all over the arena.
This is what I heard. I heard
they were taking out chairs. They were going through, like, fans were just standing, like the fans had no clue what was coming. Like, he went and got Great Okan went and got a rolling thing. I guess you put chairs on it and you like roll it. So he went and got that and put Jon Moxley on it, and he's just plowing it through a crowd of people standing there. And I'm like, you're taking out fans. He's taking out young lions. They're taking out barricades. They're fallen. Then they're like go up the steps, and then like Great O'Con like fell down this, got like shoved down the steps. Then he wraps John Moxley in this like tarp, and so he basically made a body bag, and John Moxley is bleeding, of course, because as Chris Charlton says, it's a
that's
day.
what he
He
does.
said it's the day that ends in Y. John Moxley is bleeding.
Pretty much.
And he bled pretty quickly into this match. So he's like in this tarp, bleeding all over the place inside the tarp, and he can't get. And then Great O'Con grabs like barricades and throw them on top of John Moxley in the body bag so he can't get out. And of course he does. Then John Moxley like produces scissors. I don't know where they were in his pocket, I think.
He just has them. He keeps them.
So he's dragging Great O'Con by his ponytail, drags them up the ramp, and they're like fighting on the ramp, and they're like, don't throw him off the side. So then he takes the scissors and he cuts some of Great O'Con's ponytail, and he just is like, I don't know if he was supposed to cut as much as he did, but he cut a lot. And then he leaves the ponytail, and I was like, somebody pick up his hair. And I thought he was putting the ponytail in his pocket as a souvenir, but no, they show this shot on the floor, and it's the ponytail with his little hair clip in it. Oh my, this match was insane, and they were just
Awesome.
It was very brutal. But I mean, New Japan John Moxley is my favorite John Moxley. Like, that guy,
because he gets like old school. Like that's such an old school like FMW style. Like that just makes me think of like I want to watch that. I actually, my friend
go
told me
out
that
of your.
it was a lot of
I
fun
would
too.
recommend like go out of your way to watch that match.
He told me. I mean, he flat told me that this was almost a drop everything and go watch this.
Like,
especially he said that Shooter and Will Ospreay was just. He said it was like, he's like, I'm like serious. You should probably just drop everything and go watch it right now.
That main event, like I saw somebody call the main event a match of the year. Like they were like, it's the more I think about it, it was match of the year. So
I'm so proud
the match.
of that.
So yeah, Mox and Great O'Con was phenomenal. It was a really fun match. I would definitely go watch it.
I will watch it. I will. I just
Vincent says Mox in Japan is just different.
He is. He's like, he really
completely different level of intensity.
Like
he
gets the like in a Terry Funk or like I don't know, like Bruiser Brody way. I don't know.
Yeah, and Brad says the match reminded me of old school New Japan in the days of Bruiser Brody and Tiger Jeet Singh. Just an insane brawl. That was awesome. Yeah. It was so, and we've talked about this before. Like, there's AEW John Moxley, then there's Indie John Moxley, then there's New Japan John Moxley, and they're all awesome. But he just like he turns it up a level at each place. And New Japan, I feel like well, the Indies do too. I feel like those two give him the freedom to do what he can't do in AEW because he's got to be more structured and has to go by TV guidelines.
It's that strong style thing. It's that old
and he just
style. He just like
when
that.
Yeah, when he needs it, because we talked about like when GCW, like when he wasn't going to be allowed to wrestle there anymore, and I was like, this is a mistake. John Moxley he's just that type of wrestler. Like he needs places where he can go all out and do some things that he
wrestled Be Cool at OTT recently, but whomever he wrestled, it was because John showed me pictures, and at one point he was like, he had a tramp stamp and blood on his back because
saying that
because of course he did, and but he said, I mean, he like dragged him all over the place too, and said that it was a great. I mean, I'll give Moxley all the credit. He I've never been disappointed, and he loves wrestling so much. Like that first Forbidden Door when we were off the air, and he was just walking around like talking like sort of off. Like he's just like, I love this shit so much, and it's just like
it's very
so
obvious
much.
We know. We can see.
Thank you, because you are a breath of fresh air, sir.
Yes, we need you.
A bloody breath of fresh
air. And like one of my favorite matches that John Moxley has had was when him and Filthy wrestled at Defy, and they were bloody messes, and
that was a really good match though.
It was one of my favorite matches of the year. So like I was like, John Moxley needs this type of stuff. He's the best. I love him. I could never say enough good things about that man.
Never ever.
So then because I got those out of order. So Haramu versus Ishimori was the next to last match. So then the main event obviously was Will Ospreay versus Shooter, and it was for the US and UK titles because Will has he had a UK one created. So they were for both titles. Shooter is 0-3 against Will Ospreay. Will cut this promo talking about like the day before at the press conference. He was like, do you even know what the name Roughneck means? Because that's Shooter's nickname. And he's like, do you even know what that means? How do you even embody it? And he was like, I can't leave New Japan in your hands. If you basically like, if you can't beat me, I can't leave New Japan because I'm not leaving it in good hands. And he was just going on and on about like just trying to goad him into like, you have to step up, like you have to beat me, like I want you to beat me. And so Shooter said that if he beat Ospreay, then he was going to challenge Jon Moxley at Wrestle Kingdom. So that immediately got my interest. I was like, "Oh, you can't promise a match like that and not deliver." That's what I was thinking. Vinkin says, "Yes, I do not feel safe leaving New Japan in your hands." Yeah, and Brad says the main event is in my top 2 favorite Ospreay matches of the year, and after I rewatch it again today, it might end up being number 1. The story of the match. The story the match told was beautiful and perfect. Like his match with Speedball, I have watched twice. The one from Bound for Glory, because I watched it on Bound for Glory, and then they showed it last week on Access, and it was or the week before last, and was just a fantastic match. I loved that match. And they were talking about how like they had a match, like he had the match of the year candidate for a lot of people with Kenny back at Wrestle Kingdom this year. And so now he's having this, and this match went 40 minutes, but it didn't feel like 40 minutes. Like it like was just nonstop, like from the jump. Like as soon as that bell rang, like I couldn't believe that match was, I think it was 40 minutes and 15 seconds. It flew by. It felt like 20 minutes, like literally, like I couldn't believe, like I knew going into it that it was 40 minutes because I saw Walker tweet that it was, but it didn't feel like it. It was
I was having the conversation of whether or not we now have to discuss if Will is the best in the world right now. So
yeah, that's a conversation a lot of people are having. And Venkin just said Ospreay casually stacking up really good matches.
Yeah, or having just like he's wrestled everybody, and he always does. I mean, he's wrestling everyone.
Yeah,
and it's always the best match ever.
Yeah, I've had my issues with Ospreay, but just because of some offline stuff that he has made me dislike him. It does seem, I will say, it seems like he has grown up a lot. And so hopefully that has changed some of his past behaviors, because he has not been the greatest towards women wrestlers. Mm-hmm. He has done he's been very mean to some of them. And so like there was a woman a few years ago, she left Japan because her grandmother died, and he was like, he got online and publicly chastised her and was like, you can't leave. Like, if you're serious about wrestling in Japan, then you don't leave to go home for a funeral. And you just like, just really nasty. And he was with B Priestley at the time. She joined in, and it was just, so I've had my issues with Will because of how he has treated women before, and this is not the first time. However, I will say it does seem like he has grown up. And I haven't heard anything recently. But that did taint my perspective of him, just because I didn't like how he treated women. So right. I have had a lot of, and I was a really big Ospreay fan up until I saw the way he was treating multiple women, not just her. And so that really affected how I looked at him in the ring. Like, I was like, I don't even want to watch his matches. He's an asshole. And so he has had undeniable, like, really great matches this year. And it seems like he's grown up a lot, which is always nice to see. And maybe he doesn't treat women the way that he used to. I don't know that to be the case, but again, like I said, so that has tainted my view of him for the last few years. But I think it is, aside from that stuff, he is having some really incredible matches. I mean, he's beating, I don't know that I would say he's better than Kenny Omega or Okada. However, he has had a stretch of matches that is undeniable. Like the
He
talent
beat
he's
Kenny
beating, and he's
Omega at
beaten.
Forbidden Door too, so I mean
Yeah.
that means that like a lot of
Yeah, and
ways.
that's what I was
I
gonna
mean,
say, you know,
regardless of how we get that back, I think the idea
right.
there is, and that was, geez, that match is probably one of the best matches I've ever seen in my life. And
Yeah,
I
that
was
was incredible,
there,
and that's what
and
I'm saying.
I
Yeah,
mean, I've
he
never almost jumped out of the stands before on account.
yeah, and you
Like
saw it live. I saw how it was on
it
TV. I can only
was.
imagine in person what it
I
was
mean, I
like.
literally. It's a good thing the people in front of me were taller than me because I probably would have just.
Vinkin says on Strong Style they said he's top 3.
Yeah,
I would argue
I'm into that.
that's I think that's probably a fair statement. He's not 17 or whatever PWI put him at.
I mean, Okada right now is not wrestling the same amount of people, and he's not in
Yeah,
the
and
same amount of
his wrestling
spaces.
has
So, in
been a bit
terms of
different.
like
Sure.
actively wrestling, but I mean,
Yeah. Well,
I'm
and you can
happy
make
with
that
3.
argument for
I'm
Kenny
happy
as
with
well.
like juggling those 3 people, whomever they
Yeah.
may be.
Yeah, and I think he makes, I mean, then there's Danielson who has had
Right.
an insane amount. Like they're definitely both in the conversation.
Oh yeah.
But this match was it put Shooter on a completely different level. He answered the question. He knows what a roughneck is, and he proved that he is one. Like he really solidified himself as being, he's moved up to the next level. Like there were times that I thought, so if you have not seen this and somehow have missed, Will Ospreay did win. There were a couple of times that Shooter nearly got the best of him. Like there was one time that I thought he had it. Like I thought it was finally happening. And it was just, and then like it's just incredible. And we've seen a side of him that we've not really seen a whole lot of. Shooter was a lot more violent. Like he literally threw a table in Will Ospreay's face. He hit him in the face. Like he literally threw it at his face. Like I was like, what? And he
Oh.
considered putting him through a table. Then Will ended up putting him through the table later, which kind of didn't really come back to bite him because I think regardless he would have lost. But he was really aggressive. And there were a few times that Will had him like where his arms were pinned and he couldn't fight back. And Shooter spit in his face. It's like, oh my God. And then of course he paid for it. And Red Shoes did not get involved this time, as far as he didn't like throw, he has gotten that. They talked about that, how I think it was Royal Quest, how Red Shoes stepped in like on his behalf and was like, you aren't going to treat my son like this. Well, it got to the point where it upset Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley came to the ring and was like, don't give up. And he's yelling at Shooter, don't give up, fight back. And he's like, do not quit. You can beat him. And just in his corner, constantly just trying his best, like willing Shooter to fight. And it was really, and like you could hear Moxley just yelling. And sometimes he was yelling and you couldn't understand him, but you could tell like he was trying so hard. And Vinkin says when Moxley came out, it just got better. Yeah, Moxley being there didn't take away from the match. I think it added to it. And so then after the match, Shooter just starts crying because he was so close to beating Will Ospreay and he failed. And it was just all this emotion just finally just came out.
Well, that sounds like a Wrestle Kingdom rematch. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and so unfortunately that's not the match we're getting. I'm going to tell you what we're getting instead, and I don't know how I feel about it. So Shooter is like down at his feet, and then Ospreay comes over to him and bows back to him, and he has earned Will Ospreay's respect. And so it was really powerful imagery to watch. And so Shooter can't get into Shooter can barely stand. He's struggling. Jon Moxley is like trying to help him. Nikki was laughing and she was like, Nora probably walks better than Shooter does right now. It's just like he can hardly stand. And then like one time he just kind of collapses on the outside. And so Jon Moxley just left him there. John grabs the microphone, he gets in the ring, and he was like, so there looks like we're finally, so it looks like, I was like, oh, okay, maybe Moxley is like, I'm going to challenge you at Wrestle Kingdom. So I thought this is where it was going. Vinkin says, get ready for the disappointment. Yeah, because it's coming. So we barely get into it. And here comes David Finlay and Gato. And he takes out both of them. And he's talking about how that title doesn't mean, or that title used to mean something, and they, he knows that title both means a lot to Jon Moxley and Will Ospreay, and how he wants to hold it, and he's like and he's just being an asshole, of course. And so Ghetto has this big sledgehammer type thing, and he takes like he laid them both out, and so they're just watching, they can't do anything, and he's just beating apart the belts, and like the United States and the UK logo fall off of them, and he's dented the belts, and they can't do anything. And so he's just yelling at them and talking about how he's messing. He was like, you're not getting this match or whatever. And it was kind of dumb. I was like, I know what they're doing for Finlay, but it just feels really, I don't know. I was just like, I like David Finlay and I want this to work. It's just not connecting for whatever reason.
Right.
And so then they finally so Finlay leaves. And Nikki said it reminded her of a cartoon mallet. Yes, that's what it looks like. And yeah, Vincent says, never forget what they took from you. And so, yeah, it was kind of a mess. It kind of took everybody out of it. So it looks like and then they
got my Acme hammer out.
They get to the back. Oh, but this is true. Brad says it's a good story to get the Intercontinental title back. And that's what I said to Nikki. I was like, as long as we get the Intercontinental title back, that belt should have never went away. So yes. So David said either it brings back the International Championship or New Japan creates a new belt for him, is what he says. Okay. So they go to the back. Ospreay, Callum Newman is like trying to hold Ospreay up. Ospreay can barely stand. He's like leaning over and he's fussing about what happened. And he was like, so basically he was like, I guess the match is now going to be me versus Moxley versus Finlay for Wrestle Kingdom.
A 3-way?
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Thank God we're getting Danielson Okada.
Yeah, and we're gonna have Naito in the main event. Poor Naito keeps saying, he's like, I don't believe this is the main event until it happens. I was like, please don't make Jon Moxley versus Will Ospreay versus David Finlay a double main event, because that would be terrible.
My gosh.
I was like, please don't do this. Yeah, I get like what Brad is saying. Like I don't have an issue if I hope this is bringing back the Intercontinental title. They do need to have David Finlay. He's got to be, for the story,
they got to elevate him.
They've got to elevate him, especially because the War Dogs ended up being more popular than he is.
They've got to do what they did with Jay White with him, but I don't know if he's I don't know if he's on Jay White's level.
And I like David Finlay and I want this to work. It's just not connecting for whatever reason.
I don't know if he has the thing though.
Yeah.
It's going to put him up to that next.
Yeah, I don't know. And he's had some good matches, but it's just not like people aren't talking about David Finlay. Like when you talk about Bullet Club, because obviously there's different forms. There's obviously Black and Gold. Club Gold. Yes, Bullet Club Gold is what most people talk about. Then, there's ABC who are still in Bullet Club, but they're not really doing anything with Impact there. Sometimes Kenta is in Impact. Apparently, from what we heard a few weeks ago, Kenta is not on good terms with New Japan. So it sounds like he might not be in Japan anytime soon. And it just feels like it's so... And like, I like the War Dog stuff. Like, I like the idea of going back to what Bullet Club is about, like the original, going back to the Prince Devitt stuff, because that preceded my time. I didn't watch New Japan at the time. A lot of the stuff I found out about after the fact. I didn't start watching.
You too.
It was right when AJ left and Kenny was in charge. So that I know Bullet Club from when Kenny was the leader.
Yeah.
That's when I started watching. And so I do like the idea that they're trying to do with going back to why Bullet Club is a thing and like what they were there to do, which is to disrupt everything. But then it comes to the point where they're disrupting, but to the detriment. Like it's not moving anything. It's just it's almost like I don't think it's as bad as House of Torture. But
okay. Well, that's good anyway.
I personally don't think it's that bad as quite as that. It just feels like it's just not connecting, and I don't know why this is the Wrestle Kingdom match. I don't know, especially because Will is likely on his way out of
Yeah,
New
I mean,
Japan,
yeah.
most likely. And I did get this come through earlier, and so I'll read it. There's a new select about Will Ospreay. So in Will Ospreay yesterday, like he quote tweeted because Seth Rollins retained his title at the Blood Money show, and he quote tweeted it and was like, so he's clearly paying attention. And he has, we talked about it on last week's show that he has talked about how like he just remodeled his kitchen at his home in England. He's like, spent all this money, but I'm willing to move to the US, which was something he wasn't willing to do before. So this says it's been reported recently that many in AEW considered it a foregone conclusion that Will Ospreay was joining the company. While that may have been true months ago, we're told Ospreay's mind has been opened about his future. WWE has shown heavy interest, and sources within the company claim that there have been conversations and contact between the two sides, though those close to Ospreay would not confirm as such. TNA and AEW maintain interest in Ospreay. Ospreay has talked very positively about TNA, Impact, the last few weeks, and he's had a lot of really good things to say to them. I don't know that they have the money to afford Will Ospreay, but
I don't know, but Scott D'Amore has been pretty public about please come here. So
yeah,
he literally is tweeting about it. He's like,
he is not
wide
hiding.
open.
Yeah, and Will, to his credit, is like not shutting him down, and like he had a really great match with Speedball, and he's been having some good matches in Impact. So it definitely seems like he's at least considering it. I don't know how seriously he's.
Yeah, I mean, he's leveraging to see who will give him the most money,
which is what you do. It's smart
business.
He's doing the smart thing.
It would not shock me if he went to WWE at this point. I know that sounds weird. I don't want to see it, but it wouldn't like blow my mind or anything.
If Endeavor is paid, but see, that's the thing. Endeavor could pay him. However, Endeavor likes to cut people and have talked. I mean, they did when they took over, when they, they cut a lot of MMA fighters in the past and some big names. So it doesn't seem as foregone as it might have a couple of years ago. But then on the other hand, I think Endeavor could pony up the money for Ospreay if they wanted to. So it says here, we aren't sure the nature of the deals being discussed, as NXT Europe, Impact becoming TNA, and adjusting many elements of production and stepping up their European presence are all taking shape. However, Ospreay predictably has interest from all over the world. New Japan sources said that they'd love to keep Ospreay. They don't necessarily expect it on the same type of deal he's on now, where he's full-time in the company. WWE sources have confirmed to Fightful that they have interest and that there have been preliminary overtures made towards Ospreay, though we aren't sure what that consists of. WWE did not comment in an official manner. So sounds like the Will Ospreay sweepstakes are still wide open. So it's, I mean, he could be New Japan could be setting him up to go on the way out, which is why I wouldn't have been surprised if Shooter won yesterday, because he does seem to be wrapping it up, and so getting those titles off of him would kind of signal that he's, on the way out. Vinkins says, at least House of Torture's leader, Evil, is better than Finlay. I don't know if I'd say that, but maybe. I haven't been watching as closely, so maybe he is.
Yeah, maybe.
Brad says Finlay could have been put in the match to eat the pin. Yes, probably. That's probably why he's Brad's right. Vinkins says they aren't re-signing people in WWE at the moment, but they did sign Jade to a very big deal. And Becky Lynch's contract comes up next year. Drew McIntyre's contract is coming up. Apparently there's quite a few. The names haven't really been released. Becky, it just came out like 2 weeks ago that Becky is one of those people. I expect them to give her everything that she wants. They do not want to see. They do not want to see her go to AEW. They already lost Mercedes. They're gonna take losing her too. I think they'll throw whatever Becky wants. They will keep,
especially with Seth Rollins being there already, and he's not going anywhere. So
no, he's a corporate shill. He's not going anywhere.
Oh yeah.
Grace says it's money. Oh, for sure. Venkins says don't be shocked if Drew is gone after next year. Yeah, and Drew lost yesterday. So that kind of, and they've been very far apart. From what I've heard, they've been very far apart on contract negotiations for quite a while.
Yep, that's what I heard.
Drew is really interesting because he is a really big name, but I just don't know where in the hell you would put him in AEW. Like, I just don't see a spot for him. I'm sure they would create one. He could potentially go to TNA, just with the way TNA is rebranding and they're very serious about what they're doing. Maybe they have Anthem can get them, maybe Anthem finds the money for Drew McIntyre. I could see him potentially going over there. I think in the long run, he'll probably stay with WWE. But that was definitely one that seems, because it's taken them such a long time. And I know they put, part of it is the Endeavor thing, and they put a freeze on.
Yeah, but it doesn't sound like they're like on the same page about anything when you hear about it.
And it doesn't seem like they have been for a really long time.
Yeah, that's how I've even read the tiny bits of the Observer I read, is that
Drew seems to be like ready to just like
good for him. I mean, you have to now.
Yeah. Venkins says that they've talked about it on Strong Style that he could replace Finley. That Drew McIntyre could replace Finley, I believe. Is that how I'm reading it? Again, like I said, our comments are on a delay.
I think Drew McIntyre could fit into New Japan as a foreign heel, or a foreign talent.
I could see that. Like, I think that Drew could find a home. Like, Drew is somebody that I think he won't be.
He'll get picked up somewhere. I mean,
he'll get picked up somewhere, and he could go to AEW. I just don't know
where you'd put him.
Where you would put him in. It's hard enough as it is to get. Got Ric Flair there now. So. Gotta fight for that. You gotta get Ric Flair off TV and take his spot, I guess.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. So yeah, we do see Wrestle Kingdom is shaping up. Don't really know how I feel about this match. Maybe as the build goes on, it'll be like, I'm sure it'll be a fine match, especially because it's Ospreay and Moxley, and two of them are incapable of having a bad match. And I don't think Finley is a bad wrestler. I think it's his character. They just can't quite get it there. Maybe this match helps elevate him. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, Gato has done it before.
And it took a while. Gato, other than the House of Torture stuff, Gato is usually pretty smart. He usually knows what he's doing. I tend to give him the benefit of the doubt with most things, because it usually works out the way it's supposed to. So I'm hoping that the Finley stuff will eventually work out. Excuse me. But it looks a little rough right now. But maybe in the next few months we'll figure it out. Venkins says that AEW is too full at the moment. I mean, they've been too full for a while, and they keep bringing people in. So, but yes, I agree with you. I don't think Drew was a good fit for them, just because there's nowhere for him. Like, you can't have Drew come in and then be a mid-carder. Like, that's not going to work. But then there's MJF is going to be. Like, MJF's going to be the unfortunate. Like, I do think Jay White will eventually be champion. I don't think it's going to be in a couple of weeks. I think it'll be later on down the line, because I think that, and we've talked about this before, and I know a lot of people are talking about it too, that Tony doesn't pivot very well when things come up. He stays stuck to it. He will just kind of, and so that's where things get weird. Like MJF, we've talked about it a few weeks ago. MJF should have just vacated the ROH titles and should be doing something else, and that's not happening. And then we saw the whole thing with Chris Statlander. They kept the title on Jade for this whole time instead of, they could have used it to elevate Ruby or somebody else, and they didn't. And he's clearly the Adam Cole stuff has completely been thrown off it's thrown up a lot of things. And I know that they're doing the best that they can, but it just feels like they're panicking, and they are relying on things they shouldn't. And they also should probably get certain people out of creative.
Yeah.
Looking at you, Jimmy Jacobs.
It's kind of time
to Jimmy Jacobs produce matches.
Get to the point. Like, get to the point, basically.
Right. Yeah. And I don't Jimmy Jacobs out of creative. Let him produce some matches or something. Just get him out of creative. Apparently, Jeff Jarrett is not in creative. From what Jeff Hawkins says, he's not. It feels like it, based on some of the stories that are happening. But apparently, and I was like, isn't he supposed to be focusing? Wasn't he brought in for like ticket sales and stuff? So
and venues,
maybe,
like venue hookups. And
yeah,
stuff.
it's like maybe let's get him off TV and do it, selling some tickets. Maybe let's do that.
Let's get a pay-per-view in Detroit. What the fuck?
Yeah, come back. They haven't been to Charlotte since January of last year.
Wow,
it's been almost 2 years since they've been to Charlotte. Yes, right.
Well,
Ric Flair's
in there now, so
whatever. It's been forever.
Yeah,
it's been forever. So Brad says, I'd rather AEW not go after Drew. They have plenty of people who do the same thing he does and maybe even better. Even better. Yes, I'm with you there. I have nothing against Drew. I've never been a huge Drew McIntyre fan. It's nothing. It's just, I mean, he's fine. Like, he's a good wrestler. He's not been somebody I've ever been like he's just never been my fan. He's just like, okay, he's there. He has some good matches, but that's kind of how he's been for me. So I personally would not like to I'm like, no, go after. But if he were in AEW, like I wouldn't be like opposed to it. There's no room for him. I don't know what they would do with him. Venkin said 2024 Bidden War is gonna be for Drew, it sounds like, more than anything, because I'm almost positive. I mean, we've talked about this for months. I'm almost positive MJF re-signed a long time ago.
Yeah, me too. I feel like
MJF he's not
I am also in the he already signed camp. There's a few of us, but
yeah, we've talked. Yeah, Mel and I have been talking about that for months.
There's a handful of us on the network, I think, that are in that camp. I think.
Yeah, he signed a long time ago, and then he's made comments. Like there was that comment after a show like a couple months ago, and he was like, "Well, if I went to WWE, my name would be," and it was some like super Jewish name, and he was like, "I know how they would treat me there," and so he's made comments kind of off the cuff like that kind of reinforced the thought that I had.
Just ask IRS about all that. So
so I think he'll be there. So the true bidding war might actually be for Drew McIntyre.
Who
would have thought?
Hey, I mean, the world gets weirder every day.
God, we saw it last week.
Didn't we ever?
So hopefully this week is a lot more calm. I'm glad
like it to be.
Yeah, I would like it to be. I'm glad that we are having some conversations about women in wrestling, and both in the ring, the talent in the ring, and the content creators and journalists and things out there. And hopefully that leads to more productive conversations, and it leads to actual change. So hopefully that conversation should continue into next week. But the rest of it, please don't sign any other sex pests or don't need any of that.
Yeah, we can do without that. Or do commercials with jerks.
Yeah, with questionable people. So
questionably human. So, all right.
So I think that's unless there's anything else you want to add. Brad says at least Dynamite has a much better lineup coming this week.
It does look better this week. I hope so.
Yeah. You're getting into, when we've talked about it a million times about how the build for pay-per-views are, and the pay-per-views always end up delivering, but I think this is the first time that there's been an overall consensus, not just with the build, but just how the company is in general. So
it's not even about the build for the pay-per-view right now.
No, it's not. Nobody even cares about the build for the pay-per-view.
This is the first time I feel like instead of the build, people are actually talking about like what are you doing? What is the point? What is your
full
where are you going?
Between Full Gear and this World's End pay-per-view, and not to mention Final Battle, like they're gonna have to put on great shows, but there has to be we always know AEW always delivers in their pay-per-views. That's not the issue.
Yep.
It's all this other stuff. So what kind of matches are you putting on TV? Are you gonna put Paul White in pay-per-view? Are you gonna give Ric Flair his match against MJF? What are you putting on pay-per-view? Because then we might start having to have other conversations. Vinkin says WWE gonna start a good story in the women's division. I hope. I'm very glad to hear how well NXT is doing with its women, and that Tony should be paying attention to that. He should realize, and I know they need to move that over to the main roster, but they had Kairi Sane returned yesterday at the Blood Money show, and she helped Io retain her title. She attacked Bianca Belair. So they're getting into WrestleMania season. So sounds like they're going to be building some stories over there, which is good to see. And I didn't just realize we didn't even get to the Wrestling Revolver stuff. last week or this week.
Well, we'll get there.
We'll get to, well, that show is coming up, so we'll talk about it, but I'll just say, as much as I've put over Wrestling Revolver the last few months, I'm extremely disappointed that they have Ronda Rousey on a card.
Yeah.
I'm very disappointed in that, and that just goes along with everything else in women's wrestling, because now we have I'll end up in a whole nother conversation. We'll be here for another half an hour if I start talking about that. We'll save that for next week, or maybe we'll save that for the week of the show that's happening. But yeah,
we have lots more shows to come.
We do. So, and we've already kept you here for 2.5 hours, which we appreciate for whatever amount of time you spent with us this week.
Thank you.
Make sure that you're subscribed to us on YouTube. The likes and comments do help. I know it's that stupid.
If you want to comment on this and do the up likes and stuff.
Super chats are a thing that's available. We don't push very much because we always forget about it. But super chats are a thing. It helps us. But subscribing really does help, because it helps more people, and liking the videos pushes us out to people who don't follow. And speaking of Strong Styles, doing great shows. They've already had 2 live shows this week. They've been killing it with their stuff. And Garrett, I think, had some stuff yesterday following the Blood Money show. And then there's the Patreon, of course, that you can subscribe to. There's a couple tiers. If you do the $10 tier, you'll get the audio for our show, audio for Speaking of Strong Style. There's the monthly happy hour hangout. We had our first one a few weeks ago, which was a lot of fun. I don't know when the one for this month will be, but it's coming up as well. So
and there will be a piece of merch coming out for everyone.
Yes,
with every year-long subscriber that gets there, and it's coming together. Like, where the Patreon is, there's going to be a lot of good content, and I think let's just say there's more to come. Yes. It's not going to just be what's going on right now. And I mean, but we did actually promise people that signed up for the $10 tier that they would be getting a piece of merch. And we are in the process of working on that. So.
Oh, good. Brad said that Garrett reached out to him about the merch. So excited for that. So so there's good stuff coming. There's good stuff coming with that. Brad was there for the hangout with us. We ended up having like a random 15-minute talk about Filthy Tom Lawler, and apparently we all just had a gush session about how much we all love Filthy Tom Lawler. So and as Mel mentions all the time, if you subscribe to the Patreon, you get an automatic invite for the Discord, which apparently has been having great conversation.
We've been having great conversation in the Observer Radio channel, just because of a lot of stuff that came out on there, and it's a good conversation to go check out. Good people in the Discord. It's not arguing and screaming. It's a lot of actual legitimate critical thinking and discourse, if you can believe that.
That's always a nice thing to have.
I mean, there's plenty of shenanigans too, but come on, you can't always be serious. You gotta have shenanigans too.
Yeah, so thank you. That was again our 90th episode. I can't believe we're just 10 episodes away from 100. So thanks for hanging out with us today. And if you're coming back and listening, I know if one of our regulars, Daza, couldn't be here, and so he's going to check it out on replay, which he let us know, which we appreciate. And thanks to everybody
Daza.
Yeah, and thanks to everybody hanging out in the chat. It's always fun talking to you guys and getting your perspective on things, and so that's always a lot of fun and appreciated. And we will be back next week at our regular time. But I believe, because we are going to do a Full Gear, I guess we're going to do our pre-show, and Full Gear is on a Saturday. So I guess we will be doing a Saturday show coming up in a couple of weeks. Yeah, because it's Full Gear is on Saturday, November 18th. And we have pre-show has become a fixture here on the 5K Media Network, so we will be there. But the next week we'll be at our regular time, Sunday at 1:00, and we'll see you then.
All right, have a great week, everybody.